Chapter 545, The Most Powerful. Currently, far up above in the air, three streams of powerful divine sense were paying very close attention to battle down below. These streams of divine sense far exceeded the nascent soul stage. Each one seemed to contain different natural laws and different domains. Shockingly, these were three streams of divine sense belonging to spirit-severing patriarchs. All three were from the Black Lands. Two were from the Great Wild Flame Tribe and Great Demon Butterfly Tribe, respectively. The other was a patriarch from the Great Cloud Sky Tribe, the tribe Joe Deccan was a member of. The streams of divine sense hovered there in midair, staring down at the battle with both concentration and shock. Patriarch Huyan's clone is going all out. This kid has really got some extraordinary battle prowess. Patriarch Huyan's clone is different from our clones. Our clones only possess 30% of the battle prowess of our true selves. Patriarch Huyan's clone, however, possesses its own nascent divinity spirit immortal. It's a divine clone with 70% of the battle prowess of his true self. It's like a second life for Patriarch Huyan. It required years of refinement to create something he can exchange his life with. 7 superimpositions, a spirit-severing immortal beast, the will of the violet sea. This kid is incredible. As the three streams of divine sense discussed the goings-on, they only continued to grow more serious. Down on the surface of the sea, booms echoed out into the air. Meng Hao, in the form of the violet sea giant, clenched his hand into a fist again. He punched out into the air, which kicked up a violent tempest that swept out in all directions, with the power to destroy all domains in the area. The mastiff howled, and bloody light exploded up from its body, transforming into 18 sharp fangs which then shot directly toward Patriarch Huyan, seemingly capable of ripping holes in the air. A boom could be heard and blood sprayed from the mouth of Patriarch Huyan. He fell back once again. Even as he did, the giant form Meng Hao slapped his hands together in exactly the same way he had when he killed the black bat. Next, another giant began to rise up from within the violet sea. Then a third, followed by a fourth, a fifth, and then a sixth. In total, 7 giants towered above the violet sea, each one of them thousands of meters tall and shocking to the extreme. Each of the giants looked exactly like Meng Hao. As soon as they appeared, they charged toward Patriarch Huyan. This was a divine ability that Meng Hao could employ after fusing with the violet sea. 7 giants roared. The mastiff's cultivation base exploded out with all its power. The blood clone trembled, then exploded with killing intent. All of them charged directly toward Patriarch Huyan. As they approached, destructive power exploded up. The power of extermination raged. Patriarch Huyan's domain was no longer effective, having been shattered by Meng Hao using the violet sea. Patriarch Huyan's eyes were red and his hair was in disarray. He looked completely out of sorts as he suddenly howled. Instantly, a divine ability magically manifested. It coalesced into a 3,000-meter-long heaven saber. As the blade chopped down, it caused roaring sounds to fill the air. Of the 7 giants, 4 exploded. Of the fangs shooting toward Patriarch Huyan from the mastiff, 5 were shattered. All the rest continued on to slam into Patriarch Huyan. Patriarch Huyan's entire body shook violently, and he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. He tumbled backward in astonishment, his hair flying around, his eyes filled with madness. "You're good, Meng Hao, I'll give you that. To be able to fight back against me to this extent shows that you are truly powerful. However, you are not of the spirit-severing stage. Not yet. You have no nascent divinity spirit immortal. You are doomed. You cannot slay me. Instead, you have assured your own death." Spirit-severing, Patriarch Huyan lifted his head up and roared. Along with the sound of the roar, his aura exploded up, revealing the power of his spirit-severing cultivation base. As this happened, his body began to wither. In the blink of an eye, it withered up and he began to disappear. Instantly, his body completely turned into ashes and was gone. However, as his fleshly body disappeared, what appeared in its places was a spirit body. It was like a nascent soul, but fundamentally different. It was translucent and possessed immortal will. This was the spirit immortal of Patriarch Huyan's clone. Spirit severing can also be referred to as mortality severing. Everything beneath spirit severing is mortal. However, spirit severing and above can be considered immortal. After severing mortality, the nascent soul disappears and is transformed into a nascent divinity. This can also be referred to as a spirit immortal. This nascent divinity spirit immortal is not something that is easily revealed. Only by casting off the fleshly body would it be able to appear. Actually, A nascent divinity spirit immortal can only truly connect properly with one's true physical body, not a clone. Therefore, by casting off the clone's physical body, the nascent divinity spirit immortal would be able to truly employ spirit-severing divine abilities. Bright glows appeared in the eyes of giant form Meng Hao. He stared at Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity spirit immortal. Meng Hao had actually gained quite a bit throughout the course of this battle. His understanding regarding spirit severing was now much deeper. So, there is no nascent soul in spirit severing, but rather, a nascent divinity spirit immortal is formed. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as his enlightenment deepened. Thanks to this battle, the path of spirit severing was now much clearer in his mind. Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity spirit immortal began to perform an incantation gesture, touching its left thumb with its right forefinger, and vice versa. This formed a rectangle which it used to surround Meng Hao's image. Spirit severing banishment, it shouted. As the words left its mouth, rumbling filled heaven and earth, and the sky dimmed. Giant form Meng Hao began to shake, as if explosive power from heaven and earth were forming to expel him. Such an expulsion made it seem as if the entire world, as if all the lands of South Heaven, viewed Meng Hao as an enemy. It was as if in this moment all living things, even the plants and animals, all existence, were filled with an intense desire to expel Meng Hao. All of a sudden, a sound like countless murmuring voices suddenly joined together to form an echoing shout. "Begone!" The sound was such that it seemed as if the will of the entire world was focused on expelling and banishing Meng Hao. Meng Hao's giant form exploded into countless pieces, as did the other remaining giants in the area. The mastiff whined as roaring also filled its body and its life force rapidly began to drain away. It, however, did not explode. After all, it was of the spirit-severing stage. Such a banishment could only be resisted by the spirit-severing stage. Anything beneath spirit-severing would be killed by this banishment. That was the power of a nascent divinity spirit immortal. The blood clone also exploded, although it quickly reformed, only to explode once more. The violet sea churned. Deep beneath the surface, blood sprayed from Meng Hao's mouth. Roaring filled his mind as he heard all living things roaring. "Begone!" More blood exploded from his mouth. Popping sounds rang out from his body as he shot up from within the waters. The voices continued to echo in his ears. "Begone from this place, begone from these lands, begone from South Heaven." An indescribable power of expulsion caused Meng Hao to retreat at full speed. He coughed up blood continuously. The magic of this divine ability was incredibly powerful, far beyond anything Meng Hao could have imagined. The power of expulsion continued to grow more intense, causing an enormous vortex to appear in midair. The gravitation force of the vortex latched onto Meng Hao, as if it intended to completely banish him from the lands of South Heaven. "I live in the lands of South Heaven," said Meng Hao. "This is my home, you trifling spirit-severing cultivator. What gives you the right to banish me?" A look of determination filled his eyes as he slapped his bag of holding to produce the blood-colored mask. After entering the seventh anima, Meng Hao didn't actually need the mask. However, now that the mastiff had awakened, Meng Hao could actually sense that within the mask was a shocking divine ability. Originally, Meng Hao had planned to keep this divine ability as a trump card, but now he had no other options. Without hesitation, he placed the mask onto his face. When that happened, his green robe instantly turned the color of blood, as did his hair. In the blink of an eye, a glow of blood rose up from him. "Blood Mastiff, my blood immortal spirit, my Tao protector. Use the primordial blood immortal law to merge with this mask. Make your cultivation base, my cultivation base. Let the domain change, let the primordial transform, let the image of the blood immortal come." As Meng Hao spoke, his voice seemed to carry an archaic will. The mastiff trembled and a strange glow appeared in its eyes. Without hesitation, it shot toward Meng Hao. As it did, its body transformed into a red glow. It shot like lightning toward Meng Hao and then merged directly into the mask. As soon as the mastiff merged into the mask, a tremor ran through Meng Hao's body. His aura suddenly expanded out and his hair whipped about him. His robe fluttered madly. His divine sense suddenly was no longer 29,999 meters, but rather 30,000. It was only an increase in 1 meter, but that meter made all the difference compared to the previous 29,999 meters. That 1 meter gap represented the difference between mortality and immortality. Meng Hao's cultivation base suddenly exploded up. Shockingly, a blood-colored figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was a figure seated on a throne of bones, wearing a mask, hair floating in the air. Also, it was a woman. The woman was none other than the blood immortal of the Doom clan. In this moment, Meng Hao was fused with the cultivation base of the blood mastiff. On top of his great circle nascent soul cultivation base appeared another cultivation base that did not belong to him. It fused with his, causing thunderous roars to fill his body. His aura exploded out, with the power of spirit severing. In this moment, it seemed as if Meng Hao suddenly came to a new realization. He looked up into the sky, but then just as quickly retracted his gaze. At the same time, the three streams of divine sense belonging to the spirit-severing cultivators emanated powerful ripples, caused by the shock of realizing that they had been spotted by Meng Hao. He saw us. I would never have imagined that he could actually borrow the power of spirit-severing. It seems Patriarch Huyan's divine clone is going to perish. This kid, well, perhaps we shouldn't call him that. This fellow Taoist Meng Hao might not know us personally, but he is qualified to sit as equals with us at the same table. The three were now paying rapt attention to Meng Hao. Chapter 546, The Patriarch Goes All Out. Ripples of spirit-severing power expanded in all directions. Meng Hao's hair whipped about as his cultivation base roared upward. The spirit-severing power did not belong to him. He could only possess it temporarily. Even the domain was not his, but rather that of the blood immortal. After his spirit-severing cultivation base grew, an area world appeared around Meng Hao. Within his mind, he could faintly sense the domain of the blood immortal. However, he could not utilize them. All he could do was vaguely sense them. The domain had nothing to do with blood. It contained a sense of waiting and of glorious pursuit, like a blooming, blood-colored flower. In the moment that Meng Hao borrowed the spirit-severing power, the expulsion power around him instantly grew weaker by more than half. The vortex in midair vanished. An expression of disbelief appeared on Patriarch Huyan's face. Never could he have imagined that the battle would go this way, or that Meng Hao would shake him so. How is this possible? How can he be so terrifying? Don't tell me that he's a Tao-seeking reincarnation, or maybe he's an immortal soul in a mortal body. Even as Patriarch Huyan was reeling in shock, Meng Hao looked up. He could sense the undefinable power surging within him. He couldn't sustain such power for long, only about 12 breaths. Therefore, he didn't hesitate. The glow of blood surged around him as he lifted his right hand, performed an incantation gesture, and pointed forward. Sundered clouds of bloody rain, seas that cover the sky. Three forms of the blood immortal legacy divine ability, the body of the blood immortal, a spirit-severing cultivation base. In this moment, the power of all of these things exploded out. The sky was now the color of blood. Beneath the red glow, the violet sea turned black. From a distance, all that could be seen was a black sea and a red sky, with just a glimmer of violet in between the two. Even an expert artist would have a hard time depicting such a scene. There were clouds in the sky, sundered clouds. There was rain as well, a rain of blood. A sea of blood roared with huge waves that seemed to reach toward the heavens. The sea of blood merged with the violet sea, transforming into black blood. Sundered clouds of bloody rain, seas that cover the sky. These three things were blood immortal divine abilities, majestic and shocking. The sundered clouds surged into motion, causing vapor to instantly rise up around Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity spirit immortal. From within, the thick clouds emerged, sundering. A boom could be heard as the sundering mist exploded. Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity spirit immortal emitted a shrill cry. It was shocked to discover that it couldn't evade and was powerless to fight back. The natural law in the world seemed to have completely changed. These rules did not belong to him, but rather to Meng Hao, or perhaps to the woman who sat behind Meng Hao on the throne of bones. The sundered clouds surged endlessly. That was because they were propelled by a wind of sundering. Roaring filled the air as within a few breaths, Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity spirit immortal was battered dozens of times. He was forced backward several hundred meters. Explosions and booms echoed out. The nascent divinity spirit immortal seemed on the verge of destruction. He was shocked, filled with disbelief as well as an intense sense of deadly crisis. In this moment, a rain of blood appeared in the midst of the sundered clouds. It carried with it a shocking power, seemingly another expulsion power. The raindrops fell down from all directions toward Patriarch Huyan. A blood-curdling scream could be heard. Patriarch Huyan was flabbergasted and shaking with fear. Booming could be heard as his body began to fall apart. He quickly pulled it back together, only to have more blood rain whistle toward him. As of this moment, the entire world, everything in the area, was transformed into a world of blood rain. Within that world, all life would be submerged in the blood rain. But this was not the greatest danger. The greatest danger was within the Black Sea. The sea roared up into the sky. The sky roared down into the sea. The blackness of the once violet-colored sea merged with the blood rain, turning it black. The Black Sea rose into the sky, making it impossible to determine what was the sky and what was the sea. It was as if everything had been turned upside down and twisted about. Within all the booming and roaring, the sundered clouds, the blood rain, the Black Sea became blood death. Patriarch Huyan was filled with a sense of grave danger. He had the intense premonition that if he didn't do something immediately, then he would definitely die. If someone had told him before that he would die at Meng Hao's hands, he would have mocked and ridiculed that person to no end. But now, such a scene was playing out in front of his own eyes. As of this moment, though, there was no time for shock and astonishment. Heart pounding, he suddenly looked up into the sky and roared. "Fellow Taoists, the three of you must help me slay this man. Regardless of whether you succeed or not, I vow to present you with precious treasures as gifts in return." Hearing this caused the streams of divine sense to instantly reveal intense glows. They immediately began to discuss the matter. "There's no need to continue watching the battle," said the spirit-severing patriarch from the great cloud sky tribe. "The clone is doomed to perish. This Meng Hao has fused his will with the violet sea. He's not someone to be provoked lightly." His words contained obvious deeper meaning. "Fellow Taoist Yunlian, don't worry. True, we're allies and therefore can't go back on our word to help each other. However, the best thing to do would be to leave with the promise of treasure from Patriarch Huyan, and at the same time get Meng Hao to owe us a favor. Sowing some good karma would be the best outcome." That's right. It was of his own accord that Patriarch Huyan provoked a powerful foe. He can't blame anyone else. If the Heavenly Court Alliance loses the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, but then gains the Great Cloud Sky tribe, it will still be a Heavenly Court. After discussing the matter, the three streams of divine sense began to chuckle. Three forms began to take shape out of nothing. In the blink of an eye, three figures could be seen. One was a white-haired old man. Another was a middle-aged man with a luxuriant beard. The third was a young boy in a red robe. As soon as they appeared, they exchanged smiling glances. These were clones like those most spirit-severing cultivators possessed, different from Patriarch Huyan's clone, which was rarely seen. Moments later, the three figures appeared in front of Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity. Without even a pause, they charged Meng Hao. Each clone possessed roughly 30% of their original cultivation base's power. Even 30% should be enough to crush someone of the nascent soul stage. They instantly turned into three fierce beams of light that shot toward Meng Hao's three great blood, immortal divine abilities. Meng Hao's eyes glittered in response to the attack. For these three people to make a move wasn't something unforeseen. He waved his sleeve. The sundered clouds roared, the blood rain howled, and the Black Sea screamed. The three forces slammed into the three clones. "This guy is incredible. Now that I'm experiencing his power, it's obvious that he's far stronger than I imagined after simply observing him fight. If our clones met him alone with his full power, it would take only a few moves for him to eradicate us." The three exchanged another glance, then performed incantation gestures, causing their own divine abilities to blast into Meng Hao's blood, immortal divine abilities. Within a few breaths, booms filled the air. The three clones exploded, completely destroyed. Before they completely vanished, all of them cast meaningful glances toward Meng Hao. Patriarch Huyan stared in shock and then began to tremble. He lifted his head up and howled. How could he not see through the plan the three crafty old foxes had just carried out? The three clones weren't as strong as Patriarch Huyan's clone, so if they were fighting solo, they might be destroyed relatively quickly. But how could it be possible for them to be defeated so quickly while fighting together? The only explanation was that all three had actually been unwilling to attack. Everything they had done was just an excuse to get their hands on the treasure that he had promised. Patriarch Huyan's expression was livid. "If I'm going to die, there's no way I'll die by his hand," he roared. "Totems combine," he cried. 5.5 totems appeared within his nascent divinity and flew out. Within the half totem could be seen several souls that bore an eerie resemblance to Patriarch Huyan. They formed together to create the 8 sons that had been personally slain by Patriarch Huyan. Unfortunately, because Huyan Qing had died in the way he did, the totem was incomplete. With the appearance of these totems, Patriarch Huyan's expression was suddenly one of complete resolve. Ancestral awakening commenced. As Patriarch Huyan roared, the 5 totems shattered, transforming into countless fragments that fused into the nascent divinity spirit immortal. Patriarch Huyan's roar turned into a wail as the nascent divinity turned blurry, then exploded. The exploding pieces almost looked like human flesh. They shot out, but then just as quickly began to form back together. In the blink of an eye, an indescribably gruesome aura suddenly spread out to fill the area. At the same time, Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity reformed into a body formed out of countless chunks of flesh. It looked like innumerable patches of flesh were sewn together, as if the body were covered with countless centipedes. It was thoroughly savage in appearance, especially the forehead, where 3 golden scales could be seen that emanated blinding golden light. The bizarre, gruesome aura completely matched the bizarre, gruesome body. This was Patriarch Huyan's ancestral awakening body, the result of the most powerful divine ability that his clone could employ. The head had no facial features, only the 3 golden scales which were almost like eyes. They glowed with golden, flickering light that transformed into an enormous vortex. The vortex spun, seemingly powerful enough to shatter the air. As it expanded out, everything for thousands of meters around instantly began to shatter. The sundered clouds shattered, the blood rain dissipated, and the Black Sea was destroyed. Meng Hao's 3 blood immortal divine abilities were completely dispelled. Patriarch Huyan was burning his life force. His cultivation base was blurry, and his appearance bizarre in this ancestral awakening form, which could explode with power to destroy all. After the blood immortal divine abilities were destroyed, Patriarch Huyan's strange body disappeared. When he reappeared, he was directly in front of Meng Hao. He lifted up his hand and pushed out. Meng Hao's eyes flickered. Without hesitation, he waved his sleeve, borrowing explosive spirit-severing power to shoot backward. I only have about 7 more breaths before I run out of spirit-severing power. His eyes glowed with coldness. Setting his jaw, he stared at Patriarch Huyan. From the look of it, this version of Patriarch Huyan was not sentient, but rather was acting on instinct. The strange divine ability would only last until the life force powering it burned out. "Going all out," said Meng Hao with a cold laugh. "Unfortunately for you, I still have a lot of tricks up my sleeve." This chapter was sponsored by Nam Tran, Graham Kemp, Yanuar Yapatra, and James Timmermans. Chapter 547, Sealing Spirit Severing. Seeing that Patriarch Huyan was going all out caused killing intent to flicker within Meng Hao's eyes. Patriarch Huyan was in a state of madness, but his battle prowess had surged far beyond its previous level. Considering that Patriarch Huyan had entered such a state, Meng Hao could dodge his attacks and wait for him to dissipate naturally. However, the desire for battle was thick in Meng Hao's eyes. This was a fight to prove his cultivation base and master his divine abilities and arts in practice. To Meng Hao, this battle was a way to gain understanding and control over himself, to grow more perfect. Now that he faced Patriarch Huyan's most powerful divine ability, Meng Hao would not flinch away. He would fight. Even as the desire to engage in battle overflowed from Meng Hao's eyes, Patriarch Huyan's body flashed in yet another charge. Meng Hao's lips turned up in a vicious smile as he did not retreat, but rather counterattacked. They slammed into each other, making continuous attacks that sent shocking booms to fill the area. The violet sea churned violently, and the air rippled with distortions. As the battle continued, popping sounds rang out from within Meng Hao's body. He was sent tumbling backward. His borrowed spirit-severing power was growing unstable. He calculated he had only 3 breaths of time left before it was gone. In the final moment, Meng Hao rocketed up into the air. He looked down toward Patriarch Huyan, who was shooting toward him from the surface of the Violet Sea. "I've gained a lot from this battle, therefore I think I'll use the trump card that I recently mastered, to bury you." A strange light burned in Meng Hao's eyes as he spoke. As his borrowed spirit-severing power was about to fade, he took a deep breath. The image of a magical symbol flickered within his eyes. It seemed as if his entire person had slipped into some indistinct state. He lifted his right hand, causing an enormous illusory image to appear behind him. That image was a magical symbol. It was blurry, but in the instant it appeared, the Violet Sea roared as it was pushed away. It was as if some shapeless pressure pushed it away, forming a huge crater below. The air all around twisted with distortions. It was as if only this magical symbol existed in all the world. The symbol's origin was Meng Hao's eyes and his heart. This was none other than the magical symbol Meng Hao had sought enlightenment about for years, the magical symbol from the Black Land's celestial soil. Its true origin was the talisman from the heavens, destroyed and fallen to the Black Lands, where it transformed into black magical symbols. Meng Hao still had not gained complete enlightenment. Therefore, to employ it required forceful use of his cultivation base. However, with the borrowed power of the Mastiff, he was able to do just that. His expression was blank, as if he had lost use of his faculties. Within Meng Hao's mind's eye, he suddenly beheld a boundless starscape. In the middle of it all was an indistinct figure, a transcendent being. The figure stood there above planet South Heaven, waving its finger to summon talismanic paper. It began to write on the paper and then, with indescribable hatred, waved its sleeve, causing the talisman to shoot toward South Heaven. When the talisman began its descent, an aura appeared from South Heaven. The two slammed into each other, causing vibrations to ripple through space and fill planet South Heaven with roaring. Along with the roaring, the talisman burned into ash. The ash fell, transforming into the Black Lands. Within the remnants of the ash was the will of a celestial talisman. As Meng Hao hovered there in midair, he waved his right hand down. The magical symbol behind him turned black, then passed through Meng Hao's body as it shot down toward Patriarch Huyan. In that moment, Meng Hao seemed to have turned into the immortal from all those years ago. As his hand descended, the magical symbol roared. At the same time, the blood-colored mask fell off of his face. The Mastiff flew out, and Meng Hao's cultivation base fell down from the spirit's severing stage to return to its previous level. Patriarch Huyan's body trembled. The 3 scales on his forehead flickered. It seemed his consciousness returned slightly as the crisis neared. However, even as he recovered his faculties, the magical symbol closed in on him, emitting shocking roars. It slammed into Patriarch Huyan, causing an enormous explosion that lifted into the sky. Patriarch Huyan let out an intense howl of despair as the magical symbol shoved him down into the violet sea. The water seethed as it surged out in all directions. The magical symbol descended, shooting through the water until it slammed onto the seafloor. Everything shook. Patriarch Huyan's aura was nothing but a thread, and his body was completely shattered, sealed tightly to the bottom of the violet sea. His ancestral awakening body was disappearing. As it did, his nascent divinity became visible. Struggling, it transformed into glittering dots of light that slowly dissipated into the violet sea. However, even as the nascent divinity spirit immortal was about to disappear, Meng Hao grasped toward the violet sea. A power of sealing appeared and branded Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity, instantly sealing it within the blood-colored mask before it could dissipate. "Want to die? It's not that easy," said Meng Hao coolly as he sealed it. "It would be a pity to let a nascent divinity spirit immortal like this disappear. I think I'll turn it into my 3rd soul of lightning." Next, he produced and consumed medicinal pills. He closed his eyes for a moment and hovered in midair. After some time passed, his eyes snapped open and glowed brilliantly. He slapped his hand onto the blood-colored mask. The flag of 3 streamers appeared in Meng Hao's hand, as well as a glowing black wheel that resembled a chariot's wheel. As the surroundings returned to their normal appearance, Meng Hao inspected the wheel with glittering eyes. Then, he sent his divine sense inside it, branding it repeatedly until it was completely his own. It was an extraordinary treasure. Despite having its connection to Patriarch Huyan severed, Meng Hao still encountered some resistance when branding it. He gave a cold snort, causing the time sword formation to appear and emanate intense pressure. He also entered the 7th anima, whose divine sense extended nearly 30,000 meters and bored into the wheel of time. Meng Hao took a deep breath as the power of the successive brands caused the wheel of time to shrink. It turned into a black glow that Meng Hao swallowed. It sank into his Danshan region, suppressed by the 7 nascent souls there. Meanwhile, back in the Black Lands, when Meng Hao sealed Patriarch Huyan's nascent divinity spirit immortal, Patriarch Huyan's white-robed true self was sitting cross-legged in meditation. Suddenly, a tremor ran through his body. His face grew red, and although his eyes did not open, he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. As he coughed up the blood, his features changed. Before, he looked like a middle-aged man. Now he seemed older. His hair was gray and his skin wrinkled. An aura of decay suddenly emanated out from his body. The aura was intense, and seemed to cause the flame of Patriarch Huyan's life force to darken by quite a bit. For his clone to be sealed and its connection to him severed had caused severe internal injuries to Patriarch Huyan. Were it an ordinary clone, it wouldn't matter. Clones such as that were dispensable, but this divine clone was different. It was like a second life for him. As of this moment, his longevity was reduced and his cultivation base sank. It was no longer at the peak it had been before, and he could no longer wield the same level of power as earlier. His face was pale. His body trembled as he took a deep breath. Even as he was about to begin treating his injuries, another tremor ran through him, and his eyes snapped open. This was the first time he had opened his eyes during his 100-year secluded meditation. They did not shine with success. The 100 years of meditation had failed, and a tempest raged in his eyes the moment they opened. He glared at the space in front of him where three figures were materializing. One was an old person, another sported a luxuriant beard, and the third was a young boy in a red robe. "So, fellow Taoist Huyan, where are the precious treasures?" asked the red-robed boy, smiling at Patriarch Huyan. Patriarch Huyan took a deep breath and suppressed his fury. These three people had obviously joined forces, the only way to bypass the tribe's defenses. Had he not opened his eyes and ended his meditation, who knows what they would have attempted. After all, despite being fellow spirit-severing cultivators who seemed allied with him, any such arrangement hinged on mutual benefit. His divine clone had been destroyed, and his cultivation base had slipped from its peak. Although they might not attack him outright, they would devise ways to extort him for their benefit. Patriarch Huyan's face was grim as he waved his right hand. Instantly, three glowing beams of light shot out toward the three. One was a sword, the other a tree branch, and the third, a medicinal pill bottle. The red-robed boy was the one to receive the pill bottle. It emanated a rippling aura, and was clearly very different from the other two. As he tossed out the magical items, Patriarch Huyan coolly said, "As of this day, the Heavenly Pursuit tribe secedes from the Heavenly Court Alliance. However, are the three of you really so sure that I will perish by the hand of that Meng Hao?" The red-robed boy's eyes glittered. The other two exchanged a glance and smiled. No one said anything. The three of them turned and left, vanishing, leaving behind nothing but ripples in the air. After they disappeared, Patriarch Huyan coughed up a mouthful of blood, the price paid for forcefully ending his secluded meditation. His body suddenly grew blurry for a moment, and he aged even more. His eyes began to shine with a cold hardness. Considering how devious they are, they could obviously tell that I was willing to remove myself from the alliance in order to prevent the Patriarch of the Cloud Sky Tribe from attacking me to get his way in. Furthermore, those three treasures were to ensure that the Wild Flame and Demon Butterfly tribes don't support that thieving Meng Hao. Patriarch Huyan was shrewd and astute. During his battle with Meng Hao, he had seen that he might not be his match if he fought alone. He knew that Meng Hao would definitely come to the Black Lands looking for him. His main goal had been to justify giving out the three treasures and ensure that the other three did not side against him. Of course, everyone realized this. There was no need to point it out directly. "Meng Hao," growled Patriarch Huyan, grinding his teeth. He took a deep breath as he closed his eyes. He needed to restore his power to its peak to battle Meng Hao. Now, not only did he hate Meng Hao to his bones, but he also felt unprecedented fear. This chapter was sponsored by Aidan Fijalkowski, Epifanio Timilach, and Andrew Silvertooth. Chapter 548, Return to the Black Lands. Naturally, the Li Clan Patriarch was the first to receive the honor of becoming one of Meng Hao's souls of lightning. He had long enjoyed freedom and was comfortable in the blood immortal mask. As long as he wasn't being struck by lightning or tormented by the meat jelly, he was happy. He had long since abandoned any expectations of Li Clan members coming to rescue him. He felt numb toward any such hopes. Recently, his greatest enjoyment came from tormenting Jai 19. Inflicting on someone else the pain he had suffered made the Li Clan Patriarch happier than he had ever been. Of course, Jai 19 was fated to become Meng Hao's second soul of lightning, although not voluntarily. In fact, it had taken quite a bit of pleading on the part of the Li Clan Patriarch to convince Meng Hao to bestow such an honor upon Jai 19. The third soul of lightning was of course Patriarch Huyan, who had just been pulled into the blood-colored mask, completely out of sorts and on the verge of dissipating completely. As soon as he saw Patriarch Huyan, the Li Clan Patriarch grew excited, and his body crackled with lightning. Once the torment began, it naturally couldn't be minimized in any way. Meng Hao retracted his divine sense from his Danshan region, having finished observing his 7 nascent souls refining the glowing wheel of time. He floated there in midair, the blood mastiff next to him, licking its wounds. A brutal expression filled its eyes. It could sense that Meng Hao's killing intent had only grown more powerful as they carried out their slaughter. Meng Hao's gaze swept across the violet sea. Patriarch Huyan's clone had not possessed a bag of holding. At first, Meng Hao did not understand why. However, after borrowing the power of spirit severing, he understood. Some spirit severing experts might use bags of holding, but most of them opened up a space in their nascent divinity. This was another difference between the mortal and the immortal. However, Meng Hao had destroyed 10 outposts and killed many cultivators. Within the bags of holding he had collected were a host of items, which helped make up for everything he had wasted to acquire his 7th nascent soul. Voices could be heard as the members of the Golden Crow tribe approached. They looked at Meng Hao with excited expressions. They had stayed at a distance during the battle and hadn't been able to see what was happening. However, they could sense the shocking nature of the magical battle. I'm not sure what percentage of true power Patriarch Huyan's clone possessed, Meng Hao mused to himself. However, this clone was clearly different from the average. He smiled. It didn't matter what percent power the clone had, or how much Patriarch Huyan's true self possessed. Meng Hao would not shrink back from a fight just because his opponent was powerful. Those other 3 spirit-severing experts were certainly interesting. Patriarch Huyan seemed to have some ulterior motive in asking them to attack. It seems all spirit-severing experts are filled with schemes and foresight. I cannot look down on them. After a moment's thought, he looked down toward the Golden Crow tribe members below, and his eyes glittered brightly. Let us return to the Black Lands, he said. He waved his right hand, causing the entire violet sea to fill with a rumbling sound. An enormous violet sea giant suddenly rose up. Water poured from its surface, crashing to the sea. Next, a second, then a third violet sea giant appeared. In the blink of an eye, there were 7 towering violet sea giants, each one 3,000 meters tall. Although their facial features were somewhat indistinct, it was obvious that they resembled Meng Hao. Let's go. Meng Hao sat cross-legged on the mastiff as it flew through the air. The violet sea giants began to run, kicking up huge waves that swept the Golden Crow tribe along as they headed toward the Black Lands. From a distance, the violet sea seethed as Meng Hao sent his will outward. A wave sped out across the violet sea, causing countless specters to appear on the waters. By the time the wave reached Blackgate Fort, their numbers had grown into the hundreds of thousands. Some of the specters began to congregate around the 7 violet sea giants as they all charged toward the Black Lands. They proceeded forward with the power to crush anything. Nothing could possibly obstruct their path. Roaring echoed out constantly, to the point that the Black Lands were now on high alert. All the powers therein were sent into a commotion. When the 7 violet sea giants appeared in the distance, the tens of thousands of cultivators gathered atop Blackgate Fort could only stare as if facing an incredible foe. Below, massive waves surged across the sea. In this moment, an enormous, furious wave smashed into Blackgate Fort. The resulting boom rose to the sky, and Blackgate Fort itself shook. The surrounding mountains trembled and massive rockslides occurred. The people gathered atop Blackgate Fort were astonished. At the same time, the blood mastiff screamed through the air, Meng Hao seated cross-legged atop it. A few dozen cultivators flew out to block the way. However, the moment they appeared, the blood mastiff let out a huge roar. A spirit-severing aura appeared, along with an area. Booms echoed as the dozens of nascent soul cultivators were sent tumbling back, blood spraying from their mouths. Their disbelief and terror were absolute. A spirit-severing neo-demon. That's a spirit-severing beast. Even at the same time that the nascent soul cultivators were retreating, the mastiff roared again and shot through the great gate of Blackgate Fort and into the Black Lands. Simultaneously, 7 violet sea giants leaped out from within the waves, also passing through the gate into the Black Lands. What are those? They're giants made from the violet sea. He can actually control the violet sea. That's impossible. How could someone control the violet sea? Hey, I recognize him. That's the totemic sacred ancient of the Golden Crow tribe. When the 7 violet sea giants stepped foot onto the Black Lands, everything quaked. Even as the Black Lands cultivators atop Blackgate Fort were sent into an astonished commotion, Meng Hao's voice could be heard echoing out. I am the totemic sacred ancient of the Golden Crow tribe. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe wants to eradicate my Golden Crow tribe. That is the only reason I have come to the Black Lands this day. I will wipe out the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. I've already exterminated Patriarch Huyan's clone. If any tribes here stand in my way, I will see to it that the ruthless violet sea spreads throughout all the black lands." In response to his words, enormous waves rose up on the violet sea outside Blackgate Fort. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of specters whistled through the air to enter the black lands. Even as Meng Hao's words rang out, the 7 violet sea giants took booming strides forward. Hundreds of thousands of specters screamed through the air, obscuring the sky above. All of this caused the tens of thousands of cultivators to gasp. Not a single one of them made any move to stop Meng Hao. They were simply incapable of doing so. Whether it was the 7 violet sea giants, the hundreds of thousands of specters, the spirit-severing beast, or the roaring violet sea outside Blackgate Fort, all of it was far beyond what they could resist. That was especially true considering what Meng Hao had just said. The fact that he had slaughtered Patriarch Huyan's clone became a roar that filled their minds and hearts. In fact, many of them simply couldn't believe it. Regardless, none of them could block Meng Hao's way. Without hesitation, tens of thousands of cultivators immediately sent news of what was happening to their respective organizations. As to how each individual tribe would respond, that would be up to its leadership. What happened next astonished everyone. All the tribes immediately responded with strict orders not to interfere in the conflict between the Golden Crow tribe and the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. As he moved on, Meng Hao did not meet any interference. All the Black Lands tribes made way for him. Booming echoed out as the 7 violet sea giants stomped through the land. Hundreds of thousands of specters obfuscated the sky as they flew along. As for Meng Hao's blood mastiff, wherever it passed, a matchless aura spread about. On this day, Meng Hao's name shook the entirety of the Black Lands. With Wu Ling providing directions, Meng Hao headed directly toward the area of the Golden Crow tribe, where the war was still underway. The Black Dragon tribe had left, reducing their force by 30%. The Golden Crow tribe's battle power had been significantly reduced. Furthermore, they had already been fighting for more than half a month. It left the Golden Crow tribe with roughly 50,000 members, almost all of whom had been mobilized. Vast amounts of neo-demons fought viciously. Big Harry and the other totemic sacred ancients fought like mad, seemingly unaware of their own exhaustion. As for the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, they had mobilized nearly all of their forces. There were more than 100,000 cultivators, along with massive hordes of neo-demons, along with totemic sacred ancients. As the two sides battled over the days, both suffered heavy casualties. Originally, the Golden Crow tribe would not have been a match. However, the Thorn Rampart Vine had continued to follow the mission it had been entrusted with by Meng Hao all those years ago. It surrounded the Golden Crow tribe, causing thorns to spread out. Over and over again, it had blocked the deadly attacks of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Blood soaked the ground as the war between them raged into a fever pitch. Booming echoed about as people died left and right. The spell formation of the Church of the Golden Light was another reason that the Golden Crow tribe had been able to hold their ground for so long. The attacks of the Parrot, Meat Jelly and Outlander Beast also turned the battlefield with the Heavenly Pursuit tribe into a sea of blood. Both sides fought with bloodshot eyes. Neo-demons flew about in midair massacring each other. However, as time had passed, the situation for the Golden Crow tribe continued to grow more critical. Currently, more than 100 nascent soul cultivators of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe flew about in midair, emitting truly crushing pressure. There were also more than 20 totemic sacred ancients, who, though not spirit-severing cultivators, were at the great circle of the nascent soul stage and still astonishingly powerful. When you added in the ordinary cultivators and the roaring neo-demons, it caused the sky to dim. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe was a great tribe after all, with deep, powerful resources. Considering that the entire tribe had been mobilized, the Golden Crow tribe was no match for them. They had no choice but to slowly fall back into the perimeter of the Thorn Rampart. All the neo-demons and cultivators were deeply exhausted, but not in despair. Within the confines of the tribe members gathered around Meng Hao's statue and called out the name of their sacred ancient. It was at this point that they began to feel their blood burn with righteousness. They felt just the way they imagined the old-timers, who were now the leadership of the tribe, must have felt during the days of the migration. However, the situation continued to decline. The protective Thorn Rampart began to show signs of strain, yet it held firm. Big Harry and the Wild Giant continued to fight on, absolutely no fear of death within their hearts. They fought with madness, with determination, also incapable of forgetting the mission Meng Hao had entrusted them with. Even if they died, they would continue to protect the Golden Crow tribe. Big Harry, covered in blood, howled as he fought. The wild giant lost an eye but was still as fierce as ever. Meanwhile, within the forces of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, Zhang Wenzu looked coldly out across the battlefield. 1. Zhang Wenzu was present on the day Meng Hao led the tribe to Blackgate Fort. He was introduced in Chapter 510, where he had some interaction with Duo Lan of the Demon Butterfly tribe. He had some minor reactions to the battle in subsequent chapters, and then made a comment in Chapter 515 about wanting to fight Meng Hao. He then waved his right hand, snatching up a member of the Golden Crow tribe by the neck. He squeezed down violently. Cracking sounds could be heard as the neck was crushed. He suddenly cried out, "Tower Toppling tribe, Cloud Mountain tribe, Nine Crystals tribe, the three of you attack the right flank. Flying Cloud tribe, Vast Mountain tribe, Peng Lai tribe attack the left flank. This battle is about to end. Members of the main Heavenly Pursuit tribe attack the center, crush the Golden Crow tribe. Men, women, elderly, children. Don't leave a single one alive." Killing intent flickered in Zhang Wenzu's eyes. He, of course, was the Heavenly Pursuit tribe chosen who was taking the lead in the battle. This chapter was sponsored by Ali Torlak, Christopher Choi, and XYY. Up in midair, the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's greatfather and high priest looked down coldly at the battlefield. They were exhausted, but their killing intent filled the air. They approved of Zhang Wenzu's plans. "This battle will be over soon," said the greatfather. In accord with the orders issued by Zhang Wenzu, the tribe slashed into the Golden Crow tribe from 3 directions. The sounds of slaughter immediately intensified. War chariots constructed from magical treasures pulsated with prismatic light as they crushed anything in their path, instantly putting the Golden Crow tribe in grave danger. The peak-level battle prowess of the more than 100 nascent soul cultivators and 20 totemic sacred ancients emitted crushing pressure that weighed down on everything. It was a force equivalent to a great sect from the southern domain. As the brutal battle raged, the Golden Crow tribe was forced to shrink back. The thorn rampart vines were in a frenzy, and the brilliant glow of magical techniques and divine abilities rose into the sky. The parrot soared through midair, its eyes red. As more and more members of the Golden Crow tribe perished, the parrot felt worse. Everything happening made it think of a painful memory. The meat jelly trembled as it looked around. Although its body was indestructible, when it saw the cultivators dying all around, it felt grief similar to the parrot's. "Hey, old bird, why the hell haven't you opened the seal and gotten rid of these enemies?" "I can't open it, bitch, it won't open," shouted the parrot, charging in attack. The Golden Crow tribe fell back again. Booming roars rose up into the sky. They had long since given up on the thought of advancing. Everything was focused on defense. They were completely surrounded by the forces of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. The combined power of more than 20 totemic sacred ancients and over 100 nascent soul cultivators caused the thorn rampart vines to begin to collapse. From the look of things, it wouldn't be long before they died completely. It was at this moment that a roaring sound could be heard from the distance. 13 Heavenly Pursuit tribe cultivators came into view, carrying a black-colored pillar that even 5 people couldn't encircle with their arms. The pillar was carved with countless ferocious beasts and emanated a primitive, archaic aura that made it seem as if it had existed for countless years. The 13 cultivators proceeded forward with the pillar, their faces red and dripping with sweat. Apparently the pillar was incredibly heavy, and even with their combined strength, it was difficult to bear on their shoulders for long. As it turned out, there wasn't just one pillar heading toward the battlefield. There were 3. They approached the Golden Crow tribe from 3 directions, each one roughly 300 meters in length. From up above, the 3 black pillars looked like 3 gigantic spikes, pulsing with a black aura. They seemed to be filled with the rancor of countless ferocious beasts. Up in midair, Zhang Wenzu's eyes glittered and he suddenly cried out, "Crush them!" In response, all of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe members instantly began to cry out strange incantations. The sounds of their voices shook everything, creating a roar that turned into a sound wave. As it echoed out, the 3 gigantic black spikes responded to the power of the incantation. They suddenly flew, as if of their own accord, to drift in midair. The Greatfather and High Priest of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe lifted their hands to press down hard on their foreheads. Their bodies trembled and blood sprayed from their mouths. Their faces twisted bizarrely as they uttered the final, awkward-sounding words of the incantation. Hongmasen. The incantation sucked in some of their life forces. The sound filled the entire battlefield, causing anyone who heard it to feel bedazzled, as if their souls were being tugged at. Next, the three enormous black spikes suddenly shot downward. A rumbling bang could be heard as they stabbed into the ground. Instantly, a black field of light sprang up between the black spikes, connecting them and completely enveloping the Golden Crow tribe. In that instant, all of the members of the Golden Crow tribe, men and women, the elderly and children, even the neo-demons, all felt signs of withering within their bodies. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients split into three groups, each one of which moved into the direction of one of the black spikes. After arriving, they unleashed the full power of their cultivation bases to slam into the spikes. Each successive blast sent the three spikes further into the ground by several meters. The black field of light grew stronger, and countless bolts of lightning appeared. The Golden Crow tribe was completely enveloped, and the signs of withering intensified. The tribe members' faces filled with despair. It seemed as if what the Heavenly Pursuit tribe said was true. They really were going to eradicate the entire tribe and leave not a single person alive. 3 live spirit extermination spikes, said the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's great father. They are precious treasures of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Were it not for the fact that the Golden Crow tribe has fought back the entire time and not given in a bit, we would never have used them. Hopefully the life forces of this tribe will be of some use to the patriarch, said the high priest. The two of them sighed softly. The war had gone on for roughly half a month, but now it was finally going to conclude. They weren't the only ones who heaved sighs of relief. Most of the surrounding Heavenly Pursuit tribe members felt the same, with the exception of Zhang Wenzu, whose expression was cold. The desire to kill still flickered in his eyes. They really are tenacious. However, the more they struggle, the more quickly their life forces will be drained, and the sooner they will die. Roaring filled the air as the spikes were driven deeper into the ground. The Golden Crow tribe members were wasting away, even the Outlander Beast and Big Harry. There were no exceptions. There was despair, but as they struggled, their eyes were filled with enmity and frenzy. They fused together to form a hatred that could only be washed away with the blood of their enemies. "There's no need to struggle," said the high priest coolly. "If you want to blame someone," said the Great Father, "blame that totemic sacred ancient of yours. He killed someone he shouldn't have killed and provoked someone he shouldn't have provoked, the patriarch of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. In fact, he's most likely already dead at the hands of Patriarch Huyan's clone." He smiled, his expression one of arrogance and scorn as he looked down at the Golden Crow tribe. The parrot flew within the field of light. "Who's dead, bitch? If anyone died, he wouldn't. In the middle of its cursing, the parrot suddenly stared in shock. It immediately stopped speaking and looked off into the distance. Even as the Golden Crow tribe was struggling on the verge of collapse, even as the parrot stared in shock, the ground began to shake. The shaking was not caused by the spikes being driven down. No, this shaking was much more intense, much larger in scale. It was as if the entire world was being turned upside down. Off in the distance, huge forms could be seen, running with enormous strides that caused the entire land to quake. Soon, the aroma of salt water blasted against the faces of everyone present. A wild wind sprang up that caused dust to scatter everywhere. A towering killing intent spread out in all directions. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe cultivators sensed the shaking almost immediately. One after another, the more than 100 nascent soul cultivators and 20 totemic sacred ancients in midair looked up. What they saw was a gale force wind sweeping through the air. The wind was dark and sinister as it screamed toward them, and within it could be seen hundreds of thousands of specters. When they saw the specters, the nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients gasped. The rest of the surrounding Heavenly Pursuit tribe members were also shocked. At the same time, the shaking grew more intense. Finally, the crowds could clearly see the 7 giants leaping through the air. Every step they took slammed into the ground and caused it to quake. These were the 3,000-meter-tall violet sea giants. The aroma of salt water grew stronger. The appearance of these 7 violet sea giants caused all of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe members to gasp. "What are they?" Zhang Wenzu was dumbstruck, his eyes wide with astonishment. Then his mind roared as he realized what the giants were made from. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe high priest, his voice hoarse and filled with disbelief, said, "The Violet Sea. They're giants made from the waters of the Violet Sea. Violet Sea giants. And the one in the lead position is holding something in its hand. It's—" The Heavenly Pursuit tribe greatfather's eyes narrowed as he looked off into the distance. It was at this point that the high priest and all the nascent soul cultivators also looked closely in the same direction. In that instant, they suddenly stopped breathing for a moment. Golden Crow tribe members. Those are the ones we captured and sent to the 10 outposts. Even as the Heavenly Pursuit tribe members felt complete and utter astonishment, an enormous red shape appeared in the approaching wind. It moved with incredible speed and emitted intense killing intent. The sky dimmed and the clouds were thrown into upheaval. An intense, hair-raising pressure radiated toward the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. The intensity of the pressure felt to them like the strength of the heavens. It was an enormous, blood-colored mastiff. Standing on its head was a man in a green robe. His hair whipped about in the wind, and his eyes were as cold as ice. His expression was grim, and he suddenly exploded with seemingly infinite killing intent. Meng Hao, Zhang Wenzu's breath came in ragged pants. He recognized Meng Hao from that day outside Blackgate Fort. Meng Hao had left a deep impression on him at that time. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe Greatfather and High Priest also recognized Meng Hao, as well as some of the nascent soul cultivators. As soon as they saw Meng Hao, their minds filled with roaring. They were well aware that the Patriarch's clone had gone to kill Meng Hao. However, here was Meng Hao now. There was only one thing that meant, and everyone knew it. It was in this moment that among the trembling Golden Crow tribe members caught in the black field of light, older members of the tribe finally caught sight of Meng Hao, standing there atop the mastiff. These were old-timers who had accompanied Meng Hao during the long migration years ago. He looked almost completely the same as he had 100 years ago. Immediately, the old-timers began to tremble with excitement. Exalted Sacred Ancient, we welcome you back with deep respect. The other Golden Crow tribe members who had been born in the past 100 years, or perhaps had joined the tribe, all gaped in astonishment. The instant they saw Meng Hao, they connected his visage to that of the statue in the middle of the tribe. They too were filled with excitement. Exalted Sacred Ancient, we welcome you back with deep respect. Exalted Sacred Ancient, we welcome you back with deep respect. Their voices roared out in all directions, filled with hope and frenzy. As the sound echoed about, Meng Hao's voice could be heard. I've returned. This chapter was sponsored by Jorge Racha and Omar Hamid. Chapter 550, Breaking the Formation. The two simple words rang out from Meng Hao's mouth to fill the entire battlefield. When the Heavenly Pursuit tribe heard them, countless gasps echoed. As for the Golden Crow tribe members, their hearts filled with wild excitement. The two words contained guilt as well as killing intent directed toward the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Even as his words echoed, Meng Hao's eyes fell upon the bedraggled, listless Big Harry. Then he saw the trembling wild giant, and many other faces within the crowd that he recognized from the migration. He saw Wu Chen. He saw the remnants of his neo-demon horde. He saw the members of the Church of the Golden Light. Many images shone brightly inside his mind. More than 100 years of separation had been no time for Meng Hao, but for the Golden Crow tribe, it had been like an eternity. I've returned, he murmured. The karma between him and the Golden Crow tribe could not be broken. When he saw their sorry state, the killing intent on his face grew even more intense. At the same time, among the panting members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, the Greatfather's eyes glimmered with the desire to kill. So, you were able to evade the Patriarch, said the Heavenly Pursuit tribe High Priest. You've clearly got some skill. However, since you've delivered yourself up, today will be the day you die. Heavenly Pursuit tribe cultivators, kill this man. Eradicate the Golden Crow tribe. As soon as they heard his words, the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe roared. Zhang Wenzu's eyes gleamed with the desire to do battle. So you appear again, this time. We will fight. Zhang Wenzu had been left with a deep impression of Meng Hao that year. Right now, his will to fight exploded out. Killing intent roared up from the more than 100 nascent soul cultivators and 20 totemic sacred ancients. They were about to charge when the mastiff gave them a look of disdain and let out a roar. The roar was backed by the mastiff's spirit-severing aura. As it exploded out, an invisible tempest sprung up with the mastiff at its center. All the Heavenly Pursuit tribe members that the aura touched, including the nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients, were filled with astonishment. Their faces fell. They almost couldn't believe that it was true. Spirit-severing. That's a spirit-severing neo-demon. At the same time, the 7 huge violet sea giants finally reached the battlefield, striding forward at top speed, the ground quaking beneath them. The hundreds of thousands of specters also neared, emanating grimness. The entire battlefield was suddenly filled with extreme coldness. As the mastiff sped forward, it turned into a beam of crimson light that shot toward the black field of light that was enveloping the Golden Crow tribe. Meng Hao's body flickered as he transformed into a green smoke and a black moon. Moments later, he appeared directly next to one of the black spikes. At the same time, he entered the third anima. The parrot and the meat jelly instantly flew out at top speed to perch on Meng Hao's shoulder. They seemed as if they had suddenly found their backbones. They looked around the battlefield, their expressions triumphant and arrogant. "Come on, bitches. Well, what are you doing? Who's the tough one now? You dare to provoke Lord Fifth, bitches. Little Haoe, get out there and screw them." "Humph, Lord Third isn't going to convert you. Lord Third is gonna beat you to death. Little Haoe, get out there and screw them." Meng Hao's face was grim as he ignored the parrot and meat jelly. Now that he had entered the third anima, the power of 4 great circle nascent souls rose up within him, causing ripples to emanate out in all directions. Bang! As his cultivation base exploded out, he waved his index finger through the air. It looked like an ordinary movement, but suddenly, violet chi boiled up. This was none other than Meng Hao's violet chi guillotine. The blade descended onto the body of one of the Heavenly Pursuit Tribe nascent soul cultivators. His eyes went wide, and a booming sound rang out as his body was cleaved entirely in half. "Screw M, screw THEM," squawked the parrot excitedly, finally able to vent a bit after all this time. Meng Hao shot forward with a boom. At the same time, within the red glow surrounding the mastiff, countless bright red hairs suddenly appeared in the air. They began to rotate around the mastiff, shockingly transforming into a red tornado. It moved forward unimpeded, crushing anything that got in its way as easily as if it were dried weeds. It didn't matter if it was a sacred ancient or a nascent soul cultivator. Anything that it touched screamed and then exploded, destroyed in both body and soul. This was not a battle, this was a massacre. As for the hundreds of thousands of specters, they were grim and emotionless as they pounced on the ordinary cultivators of the Heavenly Pursuit Tribe. They could do nothing but tremble as their life force was exterminated. Most shocking of all were the 7 violet sea giants. After arriving on the battlefield, they sprang into motion. When their fists descended onto the surface of the ground, enormous craters appeared. Even more astonishing was the power of extermination that existed within them. Any living thing they touched was exterminated. The battlefield was instantly thrown into complete chaos. The sudden change caused the Heavenly Pursuit Tribe Greatfather and High Priest to gasp with disbelief. Zhang Wenzu's eyes were wide as he stared, his mind a complete blank. Originally, he wanted to duel with Meng Hao, but now he could only watch as Meng Hao faced up against the nascent soul cultivators. Not one could last for more than a single breath against him. At the moment, he watched as one of the illustrious tribe elders, who was in the late nascent soul stage, was so weak that he exploded under a single finger attack. As the man's blood-curdling shriek echoed in Zhang Wenzu's ears, he began to tremble and abandoned all thoughts of fighting a duel with Meng Hao. "Stop them from pulling up the spirit extermination spikes," he cried. Despite their shock and widened eyes, the Heavenly Pursuit Tribe cultivators howled and charged toward Meng Hao. Currently, Meng Hao was surrounded by 30 nascent soul cultivators and 7 or 8 totemic sacred ancients, all of whom were attempting to prevent him from nearing the black spike. "Screw off," he cried. The killing intent in his eyes boiled as he waved his hand, causing a wild wind to spring up that was filled with the power of 4 great circle nascent souls. It shot out, causing 8 or so nascent soul cultivators in front of him to tumble backward, blood spraying out of their mouths. 2 of them even screamed and then directly exploded. At the same time, Meng Hao made a grasping motion. The devil's spear appeared in his hand, and he tossed it backward. It instantly became a black mist filled with vicious faces which began to consume 8 or so incoming opponents. Meng Hao didn't pause for even a moment. He next appeared in front of one of the totemic sacred ancients, which bore the semblance of a rhinoceros. The killing intent in his eyes sparkled as his right fist descended. Bam! The totemic sacred ancient's face was filled with disbelief in the moment before it exploded into a haze of blood and gore that Meng Hao passed directly through. Gasps could be heard from the other 8 or so nascent soul cultivators who had been attempting to block Meng Hao. They were filled with intense shock and their minds reeled. They suddenly stopped in their tracks, not daring to get in Meng Hao's way. Meng Hao proceeded forward as if he were walking through a field of dry weeds. In the blink of an eye, he was directly above the black spirit extermination spike. He reached down and grabbed a hold of it, then wrenched up. The spike let out an intense rumbling sound as it slowly moved upward. However, it was at this point that the Heavenly Pursuit Tribe Greatfather approached. Intense killing intent filled his eyes. He knew that he must under no circumstance let the spirit extermination spike be pulled up. If he did, then the Golden Crow tribe would be able to charge out, which would be like adding snow onto frost, disaster upon disaster. "Do not hold anything back. Stop him," roared the Great Father. The surrounding nascent soul cultivators gritted their teeth, and joined by 8 or so totemic sacred ancients, charged toward Meng Hao. In the blink of an eye, they were bearing down on him. However, Meng Hao's mouth curved in a cold smile. Fourth Anima. Roaring filled the air as he entered the fourth anima. Battle power equivalent to 8 great circle nascent souls exploded out within Meng Hao. As his enemies neared, they were blasted by the explosive aura. Blood sprayed out of the mouths of all of the surrounding nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients. Even the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's great father coughed up blood and was sent tumbling backward, his face written with shock. He watched with wide eyes as Meng Hao heaved up again. A booming sound reverberated through the air as the spike was wrenched completely up out of the ground. As it emerged, it began to shrink rapidly until it fit completely in Meng Hao's palm. Now that one of the 3 spikes was gone, the black field of light which enveloped the Golden Crow tribe rippled and distorted. Some of the life force that the black field had stolen now began to descend back down toward the excited members of the Golden Crow tribe. The sight of it caused the Heavenly Pursuit tribe to be filled with shock. This man, just what level is his cultivation base? This isn't the great circle of the nascent soul stage, this is halfway to spirit severing. Even as everyone expressed their shock, another booming sound could be heard from the direction of the second of the spirit extermination spikes. The ground quaked as the mastiff completely destroyed all the nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients who defended it. Then, the mastiff smacked the spike violently with its paw. The blow was filled with such power that the spike was torn out the ground and sent flying, leaving behind a massive fissure. Having lost 2 of the spikes, the black field of light was now covered in distortions. It was no longer sucking away life force, but restoring it. It took only moments for all of the life force it had stolen to be returned. As the black spike whizzed through the air, Meng Hao's body flashed and he waved his right index finger into the air. Immediately, the enormous black spike trembled and began to shrink. In the blink of an eye, it landed on Meng Hao's palm. Without pausing for a second, Meng Hao continued toward the 3rd black spike. Anyone who tried to block his way would suddenly notice a red glow speeding toward them. The mastiff would appear and bat them away with its paw. Of course, anyone who received a blow from the paw of the mastiff ended up being transformed completely into a haze of blood and gore. Boom! Meng Hao's hand slammed down onto the surface of the 3rd black spike. Rumbling filled the air, along with a popping sound, as he heaved it out of the ground. The black field of light completely shattered, and the Golden Crow tribe members, their bodies fully recovered, charged out, killing intent rising to the heavens. Cultivation. Chapter 551, Dead End. The massacre intensified. The members of the Golden Crow tribe emerged with excited roars. This was especially true of the old-timers who had accompanied Meng Hao through the migration. Their veins burned with passion as they recalled the blood and fire they had experienced on that long road. Ah, the glory of life. As for the new members of the tribe who had appeared throughout the last 100 years, they too felt their blood boiling. It was almost like the stories that they had heard from the elder generation were suddenly playing out right in front of them. Except, it was all real. They were no longer the 5 crow divinity tribes that needed the protection of Meng Hao's neo-demon horde to survive. Even the great Heavenly Pursuit tribe needed to exert all their power to destroy them. Once they charged out an attack, their killing intent soaring up, and that old intrepid madness that existed deep in their bones once again exploded out. Tens of thousands of Golden Crow tribe cultivators charged directly into battle, joined by the neo-demon horde, Big Harry, the wild giant, their nascent soul experts, and totemic sacred ancients. They instantly slaughtered their way into the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Booming roars filled the air. It was an awe-inspiring massacre. Meng Hao hovered in midair, looking down at the 3rd black spike as it landed on his palm. He put it away, then looked around, his eyes glinting coldly. The blood mastiff roared, and then suddenly vanished. It didn't kill anyone, but rather transformed into a blinding red light that spread out like a gigantic blanket to cover the entire area. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe's path of retreat was now completely sealed off. The only strange thing was that before the mastiff transformed into the red seal, the parrot suddenly looked at it with gleaming eyes. It stared open-mouthed at the mastiff, its body trembling. A burning excitement suddenly appeared in its eyes. Meanwhile, the 7 violet sea giants continued to crash their way across the battlefield. Reddish glows emanated out from them as, everywhere they went, cultivators around them were exterminated. The hundreds of thousands of specters flew about, surrounded by icy coldness. Every place they visited on the battlefield, lives were extinguished. This was a complete and utter bloodbath. The members of the Golden Crow tribe became a blade of butchery that savagely attacked with complete determination to secure revenge. Meng Hao's body flickered, and he suddenly reappeared next to a nascent soul cultivator. It was an old woman wearing a long, emerald robe. Her face was pale with shock because of everything that had happened. Meng Hao's sudden arrival to the battle had left her completely shaken. She looked around at the slaughter going on, and her scalp went numb. She had been just about to flee when Meng Hao appeared next to her. Her pupils constricted, and she instantly bit down on her tongue and then spit out some blood. She slapped her bag of holding, causing 10 magical items to appear in front of her. In this moment of critical danger, the old woman did not hold anything back. Along with the appearance of her magical items, all the power of her totems magically manifested, transforming into a variety of totems. At the same time, her body grew even more withered as she burned a large portion of her life force. Rumbling surrounded the two of them. The old woman's face grew fierce, whereas Meng Hao's expression was cold. He did nothing to evade her attack, but simply strode forward and lifted his right hand into the air. The devil's spear instantly shot forward. The spear roared through the air, shattering the magical items, destroying the old woman's totems. It stabbed into her forehead, passing completely through to the other side. The old woman's eyes went wide and she stared blankly at Meng Hao. Suddenly, her body exploded as her weakened nascent soul shot away in flight. Meng Hao reached out quickly with his left hand to grab it and crush it to pieces. The sight of all this caused 3 totemic sacred ancients who had just been planning to launch a sneak attack to gasp. Then they fell back in astonishment. Meng Hao turned his head, and his eyes flashed as if with electricity. "Lightning," he said. Considering the massacre being carried out on the battlefield around him, it seemed at first as if Meng Hao's voice was not loud enough. However, in response, 7 enormous lightning bolts suddenly appeared out of nowhere. These were 7 red-colored lightning bolts which were filled with the will of heavenly tribulation. At the same time, they also contained Meng Hao's will. The lightning bolts shot toward the 3 totemic sacred ancients, filling the 3 neo-demons with astonishment. Without hesitation, they employed their various divine abilities, causing layers of multicolored lights to appear in the form of a shield. Demonic chi also swept out. However, in the blink of an eye, the 3 neo-demons let out miserable shrieks as the red lightning smashed through all of their magic. It didn't matter if it was divine abilities or magical techniques, all were crushed like rotten wood. The 3 totemic sacred ancients were not able to avoid the 7 bolts of red lightning and were instantly inundated. The sound of crashing thunder caused everything to shake. Everyone on the entire battlefield could see what was happening, and all of them gasped, faces filled with astonishment. 1. For some reason, I really wanted to add a line here that said, "You could even say that they were thunderstruck." This was especially true of the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, most especially the nascent soul cultivators and the totemic sacred ancients. Their faces fell and were filled with terror. Some of them even began to flee the battlefield. However, as soon as they slammed into the red barrier, they screamed, and their bodies dissolved. This place had long since turned into a complete dead end for them. The high priest of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe was an archaic old man with the bearing of a transcendent being. He held an enormous wooden staff in his hand and wore a long gray gown. Right now, though, he was trembling in his boots, and his eyes overflowed with despair. However, that despair quickly vanished, replaced with determination. Members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, hold on just a little longer. The Patriarch will definitely come to save us. As his words drifted out across the battlefield, the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe who had been so stricken with fear of Meng Hao suddenly felt flickers of hope burning within their hearts. "The Patriarch is currently on his way here," cried the Great Father. "He will eradicate this villain and destroy his tribe. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe will not fall." The Great Father was an ancient man who wore a long violet robe and whose eyes shone with a fierce light. His cultivation base was similar to a totemic sacred ancient, and he was in the great circle of the nascent soul stage. Zhang Wenzu took a deep breath. The words of the Great Father and the High Priest caused his heart to calm a bit. His face grim, his eyes suddenly shone with derision as he looked across the battlefield toward Meng Hao. "The Patriarch will definitely come," he thought. "Then what will he do? We are one of the three great tribes of the Heavenly Court Alliance. Meng Hao hasn't picked a fight with just the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, but the entire alliance. We have three spirit-severing patriarchs. This guy is definitely going to die. Meng Hao's body vanished. When he reappeared, his hand snaked out to latch around the neck of a totemic sacred ancient. This was a human-shaped neo-demon, which, after Meng Hao grabbed it, struggled fiercely. However, Meng Hao's fire Chinese letter character glowed faintly, causing the thing to burst into black flames that burned with an indescribable temperature, causing it to emit a blood-curdling scream. In the blink of an eye, the neo-demon was turned into nothing more than ash drifting in the wind. Meng Hao didn't even look at it. Having heard the words of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe Greatfather and High Priest, his mouth twisted into a smile. "You're waiting for that Cretan patriarch Huyan," he said, looking across the crowded battlefield at the Greatfather, who was several hundred meters away. The instant his gaze fell upon the violet-robed Greatfather, all the hair on the man's body stood on end, and his heart filled with a sense of deadly crisis. As he looked at Meng Hao, his mind trembled and filled with an ominous sense of foreboding. His action of looking over at Meng Hao was actually completely subconscious, but as soon as their gazes locked, the Heavenly Pursuit Greatfather's brain filled with an intense pain. It was as if Meng Hao's eyes were sharp knives that stabbed through his eyes into his brain, preparing to eradicate him. Blood began to ooze out of the Greatfather's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. He started backing up, his eyes widening. Meng Hao took a step forward and said, "I have no idea whether or not that Patsy Huyan will be coming, but you won't be here to find out, of that I'm certain." "Protect the Greatfather," cried the surrounding tribe members. Alarmed, they formed a protective circle around the Greatfather. Many of the group were nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients. Meng Hao smiled as he moved forward toward the Greatfather. His path was one of explosions and annihilation. No one who stood in his way was able to impede him for even a moment. His finger reached out to tap on the forehead of a nascent soul cultivator. Blood poured from the man's mouth and he was sent tumbling backward. By the time he exploded, Meng Hao had already moved more than 300 meters. He flicked his sleeve, and the character Wind Chinese letter appeared, transforming into a screaming wind that instantly became a cyclone. It raged out around Meng Hao, slamming into 7 or 8 nearby nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients. Blood sprayed from their mouths and they were sent flying back. There was not a single person on the battlefield who could do anything to stop Meng Hao. He proceeded forward another 300 meters. He gestured off into the distance, and immediately a frosty soil Chinese letter appeared. It spread out rapidly toward the nearby cultivators. Booming sounds could be heard as their bodies quivered and then completely froze. Meng Hao moved a third time, another 300 meters. By this time, he was directly in front of the rapidly retreating Greatfather. Even as the people surrounding him instantly charged in attack, the blank look on the Greatfather's face was replaced with despair. Meng Hao lifted his hand up and pushed forward. Metal Chinese letter. In response to this single word, a golden light exploded up around Meng Hao's right hand. The glow of it filled the battlefield, and in the blink of an eye, the Heavenly Pursuit tribe Greatfather was completely transformed into a statue of gold. A bang rang out as the statue slammed into the ground below, where it came to rest, unmoving. The look of despair was still clear on the man's face. The sight of it caused all of the remaining Heavenly Pursuit tribe members to gape. Their bodies trembled and were filled with icy coldness. The Golden Crow tribe members, on the other hand, were growing even more excited. "Sacred Ancient! Sacred Ancient!" Their roars echoed out in all directions, filled with anger and indignation, as well as their determination to eradicate the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. "You want to wipe out our tribe? Allow us to wipe out yours." Such enmity could not be reconciled. It was simply impossible to do so. The only option was for the bloodlines of one of these tribes to be completely removed from the lands of South Heaven. Chapter 552, Why Haven't You Come? The Patriarch is on his way. The Patriarch will come to save us. Hold on just a bit longer. The death of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe Greatfather filled the other tribe members' hearts with despair. The only thing that kept them from completely collapsing was the hope that Patriarch Huyan would come to save them. Huyan Yunaming was their patriarch. The slaughter intensified yet again. The sound of killing rose up to the heavens. Meng Hao was the peak power on the battlefield. Not a single Heavenly Pursuit cultivator dared to get close to him. No totemic sacred ancient had the gall to attack him. Wherever he went, enemy cultivators scattered immediately. Finally, Meng Hao's gaze came to fall upon Zhang Wenzu. In that instant, Zhang Wenzu began to tremble, and without pausing for a moment, he fled backward. His mind was reeling with shock, and yet, even as he began to flee, Meng Hao turned into a green smoke and then appeared directly next to him. "I surrender to the Golden Crow tribe," cried Zhang Wenzu, his face flickering. The pressure bearing down on him from Meng Hao was too intense, filling him with a sense of deadly crisis. Fearing that Meng Hao wouldn't believe him, he actually dropped all of his defenses. "I surrender," he gushed anxiously. "I'm the chosen of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. If I join the Golden Crow tribe, then I can give you." Before he could finish, Meng Hao's hand flashed out like lightning to grab his neck with an iron grip. "I remember you," said Meng Hao. "You were there that year at Blackgate Fort." Zhang Wenzu's body trembled and his face filled with fear. It felt as if an enormous vice were clamped down onto his neck. In response to Meng Hao's words, he instantly nodded. "Unfortunately," said Meng Hao, "the Golden Crow tribe doesn't need turncoats." With that, he tightened his grip. Zhang Wenzu was the chosen of this generation of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. He had practiced cultivation for 200 years to reach the early nascent soul stage. Right now, a tremor ran through his body as his nascent soul was crushed, and he died in both body and spirit. Meng Hao loosened his grip and turned. Currently, only 10,000 members remained of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Of the previous force of 100 nascent soul cultivators, only 20 were left. As far as totemic sacred ancients went, only 5 remained. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe could already be considered destroyed. However, with Patriarch Huyan still around, they could still count as a great tribe. Under the leadership of the High Priest, the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe had all formed together. In fact, they were now in much the same position that the Golden Crow tribe had been in before. They were surrounded by enemy tribe members, hundreds of thousands of specters, and 7 violet sea giants. In the very middle of the group from the Heavenly Pursuit tribe was the High Priest. His face filled with grief, he held his staff aloft and then plunged it down into the ground. Blood sprayed from his mouth as he sat down cross-legged. His voice shrill, he cried, "Patriarch, why haven't you come? The Heavenly Pursuit tribe is about to be destroyed. Of 80,000 tribe members, only 10,000 are left. Patriarch, why? Why haven't you come?" Even as he howled up to the heavens, the staff in front of him began to glow with a white light that then shot up into the sky. As soon as it slammed into the red light of the mastiff, it vanished. However, despite the fact that it vanished, it was still able to use a special bloodline method to pierce out into the outside world. It shot toward the location of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe directly into the mind of Patriarch Huyan, who sat there cross-legged. Meanwhile, Meng Hao hovered there in midair looking out over the scene. His eyes glittering, he waved his right hand, causing the 3 spirit extermination spikes to appear. He sent his divine sense into the spikes, then, borrowing the power of the mastiff, wiped the brands off of them and replaced them with his own. "What you did to the Golden Crow tribe," he said coolly, "Meng Hao will do to you. It's only fair." With that, he tossed one of the black spikes out into the air, where it rapidly increased in size. Roaring could be heard as Meng Hao waved his hand, causing the spike to be stabbed halfway down into the ground. Instantly, a black field of light sprang up to envelop the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Next, a second spike flew out in a different direction to then stab down into the ground. The black field of light grew stronger, and the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe began to tremble and wither. A third spike stabbed down. The Spirit Extermination Spike spell formation having been fully activated, all of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe members were now in the same position the Golden Crow tribe members had been. Their flesh withered, and their life force drained away at a rapid pace. They stood there shaking, expressions of despair appeared on their faces as they looked toward the High Priest. In turn, the High Priest looked up into the sky. As his body wasted away, his voice once again raised out, filled with hopelessness. "Patriarch, save your people. Patriarch, why haven't you come? Have you forsaken us?" Meng Hao looked at the spectacle from up above but said nothing. He looked off into the distance, a thoughtful expression on his face. The surrounding Golden Crow tribe members watched on silently. They were not inherently fond of killing, but when they saw the hopelessness on the faces of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe cultivators, they couldn't help but think of their own situation earlier. If Meng Hao had not returned, then perhaps they would have begun to cry out just like the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Time passed. Within the black field of light, the life forces of the withering members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe were beginning to wink out. They turned into corpses which toppled to the ground. As they died, their life forces were completely absorbed by the spell formation, causing a white cyclone to gradually appear. As more tribe members became shriveled corpses, the high priest continued to waste away. He now looked like a body just climbed up out of a grave, emanating a strong aura of death. Despite that, he continued to gaze up listlessly into the sky. His voice echoed out continuously. "Patriarch, did we make a mistake? Patriarch, please respond. Did we err? Why haven't you come?" 1,000, 3,000, 5,000. Finally, all 10,000 tribe members became desiccated corpses and toppled to the ground. Soon, only the nascent soul cultivators and the totemic sacred ancients were left. They trembled and cried out helplessly, and the high priest began to laugh bitterly. The laughter became sadder until it was filled with resentment. "Patriarch, why haven't you come for us?" Even as his resentful words rang out, the remaining nascent soul cultivators lifted their heads up to release the last howl they would release in their entire lives. "Why haven't you come?" Boom! The nascent soul cultivators in the field of light were now dried-up corpses. The totemic sacred ancients were all dead. The only person left was the high priest. He continued to chuckle hatefully as the flame of his life force was finally extinguished. After they were all dead, the white cyclone floating within the black field of light transformed into a white pearl. Meng Hao had assumed the pearl would disappear, but it did not. It remained there, floating in the air until members of the Golden Crow tribe approached to take it away. The scene caused Meng Hao to frown and look off into the distance. "Just what are you planning, Patriarch Huyan?" he thought. After a moment, a tremor ran through his body. He looked down into his bag of holding at the demon spirit he had acquired all those years ago in the realm of the bridge ruins. It was now shining with a brilliant light. It grew more and more intense and began to emanate a gravitational force. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. After calculating the days, he realized that the primordial demon immortal plane would be opening soon. "Patriarch Huyan, I don't care what you're planning. The fight between the two of us cannot be avoided." He looked over the Golden Crow tribe. Big Harry was there, and the wild giant too. Finally, he waved his hand, causing the glowing red shield to shrink back down and transform back into the mastiff. He stood on the mastiff's head and looked off into the distance. Eventually, he looked back at the members of the Golden Crow clan, and they looked back with expressions of fervent ardor. Meng Hao could clearly sense the intense faith power in the area. "I'm going to the Heavenly Pursuit sect. As for all of you, there's no need for you to come along." Faith power circled around Meng Hao, transforming into ghost images that superimposed with his body. It slowly fused into his cultivation base in such a way that no magical technique could cause it to diffuse. Meng Hao looked over at Big Harry, who floated there in midair, and gave him an encouraging look. Big Harry let out a few yips in response. The thorn rampart vine swayed back and forth in the air, seemingly looking up into the air as Meng Hao prepared to leave. Meng Hao turned and opened up his bag of the cosmos to suck in all the bodies of the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Then he and the mastiff flashed and shot up into the air. Behind him, all the members of the tribe clasped hands and bowed. Wu Chen and Wu Ling were there. They watched Meng Hao, their hearts filled with dolorousness. It was Wu Chen who finally spoke. The gratefulness in his heart toward Meng Hao was different than the others. "Sacred Ancient, sir, will you return to us?" "Yes," was the soft reply. The old-timers who had accompanied Meng Hao during the migration felt deeply melancholy. They knew that it would be years before any of them would have a chance to see him again. They themselves might not even be alive at that time. As Meng Hao sped off into the distance, the parrot and the meat jelly looked back from their position on his shoulder toward the outlander beast, who stood there amongst the Golden Crow tribe members. They had the sudden premonition that it would be hundreds of years before they met again, or perhaps even longer. However, it was at this point that the parrot suddenly looked at the mastiff, and its eyes began to shine with burning passion. When the meat jelly sensed this, it shuddered. The mastiff seemed to sense it as well, and gave the parrot a look. The parrot suddenly struck a graceful pose and smiled benevolently toward the mastiff. Subconsciously, it looked back at the outlander beast. The outlander beast's emotional expression caused the parrot to let out a sigh. Meanwhile, far, far away, a fissure suddenly opened up in midair above the western desert violet sea. A beautiful woman dressed in a flowing pink gown emerged. She looked irritated. "The primordial demon immortal plane is opening and the teleportation power is strong. Everyone with demon spirits will be entering." This was none other than Xianxia. She ground her teeth as she looked down at the violet sea. "Meng Hao, there is one badass bitch who hasn't forgotten about you. You stopped the demonic transmigration. She stared in shock for a moment, and then raised her eyebrows happily. So you do have some conscience after all. You still owe me, don't forget it. With a snort, she picked a mountain island and sat down cross-legged to wait for the primordial demon immortal plane to completely open. Back in the Black Lands, there were other forces who noticed the teleportation power and were similarly waiting. This chapter was sponsored by Elaine Block. Chapter 553, Lord Fifth Lives for a Dream of Love. As the members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe met their end within the field of black light, Patriarch Huyan sat cross-legged in a restricted chamber of the main temple. When the last tribe member died, his eyes opened. A cold, emotionless glow shone within them. Around him, souls formed from grief began to appear, discarnate souls, fragments of will whose main souls had already been destroyed. As the maltreated souls floated around Patriarch Huyan, they let out voiceless cries. Patriarch Huyan looked calmly at them. His voice was cool as he murmured, "Your deaths are not meaningless. They were very important to me. Don't look at it as me not going to save you. Rather, you needed to die. The more miserable your deaths, the more emotionless I can be. The more grief you felt in dying, the stronger my Tao becomes. Kinger's death made it so that my Tao cannot be completed perfectly. The only thing I can do now is to find someone to replace Kinger. You 80,000 members of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe are none other than that replacement. I watched you die, capable of saving you yet choosing not to. I watched you clamor for help and pain stabbed my heart. However, the deeper those stabs, the more emotion can be obliterated. You will not have died in vain. You will make my Tao reach the peak of the first severing. As far as the tribe goes, as long as I am alive, there will always be a tribe." Patriarch Huyan closed his eyes. Meanwhile, each step of the 7 violet sea giants boomed through the Black Lands as they ran. From afar, they resembled the churning violet sea itself, radiating boundless energy. Meng Hao stood atop the mastiff as it shot through the air in a crimson glow. Their destination was the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's temple in the Black Lands. Meng Hao's face was grim as they advanced. His eyes twitched, his hands clenched. The reason had nothing to do with Patriarch Huyan, but rather the parrot. "Hey, hi there, you can call me Lord Fifth. Let's get to know each other, okay?" The parrot flew in front of the mastiff, attempting grace and gentleness, though its demeanor remained perverted. It peered tenderly at the mastiff. The mastiff looked back, confused. When its gaze fell upon the parrot lost its composure. It clutched its talons to its chest and cried out with passion. "This is it. This is the true love I've been waiting for my entire life. Look at the fur, so tempting, look at that expression, so pure, look at that figure, so enchanting. This is the true love of my life." Tears appeared in the parrot's eyes as it looked at the blood mastiff with an expression of fanatical infatuation. "Beautiful little darling, please allow me to introduce myself again," it said loudly, its eyes shining brightly. "You can call me Lord Fifth. From now on, you're my little girl and you." Meng Hao spoke through clenched teeth, his voice grim. "Screw off." The sound caused the parrot to fall back with a squawk. It quickly flew back, glaring at Meng Hao. From out of nowhere, a black cloth appeared in its claws, which it quickly tied around one of its eyes. Its aura suddenly exploded up. "You want a duel with me?" the parrot raved. "Little Haowie, let's do this right now. Duel with Lord Fifth. This beautiful little darling will belong to whoever wins." The parrot, driven mad by love and convinced that by challenging Meng Hao it could win the attention of its beautiful little darling, was the picture of arrogance. Meng Hao felt his temples pulsing. The headache was almost unbearable. He had forgotten the parrot's unique obsession. After looking at the mastiff, he admitted it was alluring to the parrot. "It's male," he explained with a forced smile. The parrot looked hurt. "Male, female, it doesn't matter. Lord Fifth lives for true love," it roared. Its multicolored feathers stood on end, making it look almost like a gamecock. Pleased with itself, it believed it looked handsome and dashing. It couldn't help but glance at the mastiff out of the corner of its eye. Meng Hao said nothing. The pain in his head only grew. The parrot needed a spanking. He waved his right hand, conjuring wind that swept around it. In the whipping wind, the parrot struggled and roared. "This is true love. True love is invincible." "Screw off," cried Meng Hao, waving his sleeve again. The wind screamed, but the parrot's persistent voice rang out. "Meng Hao, you're shameless. You want to be the third wheel. You want to break us up." Meng Hao's face darkened. Finally, he threw a punch. The parrot roared back frantically. "Lord Fifth's love will never change. Lord Fifth's love will last forever. The parrot shrieked defiantly, then cried out in pain and staggered back, still gazing passionately at the mastiff. "Little darling, Lord Fifth will travel to the ends of the earth for love. Let's elope. What do you say?" Its eyes burned with passion. The blood mastiff, a spirit-severing cultivator, was quite intelligent. At first confused by the parrot's antics, it trembled with rage. Provoked, humiliated, mistaken for a female, it flew into a frenzy. It roared and shot forward toward the parrot, then batted it with a huge paw. With a bang, the parrot flew backward. Moments later, it returned persistently. "I will go to the ends of the earth for love. I live for my dream of love. I am the mighty, the passionate, the one and only Lord Fifth." Even as the parrot declared loudly everything it would do for love, the mastiff disappeared. It reappeared directly in front of the parrot, grabbed it in its paw, forcibly silencing it, and opened its gigantic mouth to let out a threatening roar. The tiny parrot was negligible compared to the mastiff's massive head. The parrot was about to struggle, but the crushing spirit-severing pressure calmed it. Its eyes opened wide as the mastiff's face drew close. Almost intoxicated, unable to control its passion, it stretched out its pointed beak and gently kissed the mastiff. The mastiff gaped in astonishment. Meng Hao stared in shock. Even the meat jelly was dumbfounded. Silence reigned. The parrot's eyes glowed with an intense light as it looked at the mastiff. "Lord Fifth loves your power, little darling," it said loudly. "The more powerful you are, the more you fight back, the more Lord Fifth loves you." The mastiff lifted its head and roared. Its fury had reached its peak. Fierceness blazed in its eyes as it bit down, tearing the parrot to shreds. Moments later, the parrot reformed and shamefully resumed shouting. "I will go to the ends of the earth for love," it declared. "I live for my dream of love. Even if you kill Lord Fifth 1,000 times, it's like tempering steel. My love for you is eternal." The mastiff roared, charging once again to tear parrot into pieces. And then it all began again. Meng Hao rubbed the bridge of his nose and laughed bitterly. The meat jelly settled on his shoulder, its hand mimicking the gesture, its expression matching his. "Now do you see why it takes Lord Third an entire lifetime to convert it?" said the meat jelly somberly, regarding Meng Hao with an enigmatic look. "Yes, I get it now," replied Meng Hao, sighing. In that moment, he realized his massive mistake. He had actually started a conversation with the meat jelly. The meat jelly's eyes blazed with sudden chatty enthusiasm. "You get it? You really get it? Heavens, you understand me now. Okay then, let's talk about something from 30,000 years ago. It was absolutely infuriating. Oh wait, before that let's discuss the weather from 70,000 years ago." The meat jelly trembled with excitement, its chatter becoming a droning sound in Meng Hao's ears. He watched the mastiff and parrot battle while the garrulous meat jelly prattled on. Suddenly, madness threatened to overwhelm Meng Hao. Anyone spending time with both would surely go insane. Suddenly, he felt sympathy for the Li clan patriarch. Meng Hao sighed, resigned to silence. He let the meat jelly prattle on while the parrot continued being battered by the mastiff, each time returning with words he could not escape. Soon, he went numb. Time crept forward. Half a day later, as the parrot paid court to the mastiff, and the mastiff violently refused it, the Heavenly Pursuit Tribe's temple appeared. The temple itself was an enormous mountain shaped like a bottle gourd. It looked like a gigantic stone bottle gourd placed directly onto the surface of the land. The mountains that surrounded it were bare and infertile. The only entrance was at the top of the mountain, at the mouth of the gourd. The bottle gourd mountain loomed ahead. Meng Hao shot toward the mouth and sensed an incredibly powerful restrictive spell. The mouth resembled a volcano's maw, roughly 300 meters wide. An enormous magical symbol stretched across the opening, preventing anything from entering, person or divine sense alike. Beyond the illusory mouth, another world hung barely visible, shockingly real. Note from Urgen. "Hey, let me tell you a personal story from back when I had just started college. One time our dorm had a party with the girls' dorm and I took a liking to one of the girls. Unfortunately, in the end I was turned down. As for her name, well, I still remember it down to this day. At that time, chat software was just starting to get popular, so I started a QQ account. As for whether it was 5 numbers long or 6, I can't remember. 1. QQ numbers nowadays are 8 or 9 numbers long, so this shows how old school he is. Anyway, for whatever reason, the first online username I ever picked was Live for a Dream of Love. As I recall it now, it seems both corny and also somewhat unthinkable. At the same time, it reminds me of how wonderful youth can be. Alright, enough of that. When I have a chance, I'll tell all of you about 3 love letters I received in college, as well as the one I received after I started working. Every once in a while, I remember them and take them out. They make me both sigh and smile. The paper is yellow and old and makes me think about past times. To be continued. This chapter was sponsored by Jacob Phillips, Januar Yapatra, Tijandra Johans, Fabio Porcetta, Patrick Cizek-Zinski, and Sebastian Weiss. Chapter 554, Huyan's True Self. He saw vast numbers of houses, ornate palace buildings, countless temples and tribal districts. Nearly 10,000 people sat cross-legged atop the houses, their bodies withered and fused with the structures. They spared no cost, sacrificing their life force to maintain the restrictive spell. Meng Hao couldn't make out more details. As Meng Hao arrived at the mouth of the gourd, he sensed multiple streams of divine sense around him. Some were from non-spirit severing sources, yet still valiant, coming from magical items that allowed cultivators to lock onto this position. Meng Hao ignored them. The fact that no one had interfered during the battle against the Heavenly Pursuit tribe revealed the attitudes of the others. The appearance of these divine sense streams made their attitude clear. They had come to see what would unfold between him and Patriarch Huyan. Some had vested interests, though Meng Hao cared not why. The mastiff, having endured the parrot's company the entire way, needed no orders. A bright red glow erupted from its body as its spirit-severing aura exploded, and it swiped its paw against the magical restrictive spell. Booming and cracking sounds erupted as the magical symbol collapsed. Another restrictive spell appeared. The mastiff's fiendish will expanded as it roared and swiped repeatedly. The gourd mountain shook for 10 breaths while the mastiff destroyed hundreds of layers of restrictive spells, penetrating only 150 meters into the gourd's mouth. The entire gourd was filled with restrictive spell formations. The mastiff was about to continue, but Meng Hao calmly stopped it. Hovering outside the gourd's mouth, his eyes cold, he waved his right hand. One of the 7 violet sea giants advanced, transforming into a majestic violet sea that poured into the gourd. If the people die, Meng Hao said calmly, the restrictive spells will shatter. In the southern domain, he had not been cruel. However, his experiences in the Black Lands, Western Desert, and the Crow Divinity Migration had forced him to shed his naivety. He had changed and now acted as a true cultivator. When dealing with enemies, any tactic is acceptable. When dealing with benefactors, debts of gratitude must be repaid, regardless of the cost. As he spoke, the violet sea poured into the gourd. The power of extermination exploded in rumbling roars. The entire gourd mountain trembled violently. Life and death collided as the power of extermination roared. The restrictive spells, powerful though they were, contained life force. The 10,000 Heavenly Pursuit tribe members' life forces became linchpins as the violet sea sank into the gourd. Roaring echoed from the gourd's interior. The cultivators shattered into pieces. Massive explosions echoed as layers of restrictive spells shattered. The second violet sea giant approached, transformed into seawater, and poured into the gourd. Then came a third, a fourth. 5 violet sea giants transformed into seawater and poured into the gourd. Rumbling filled the world within. The restrictive spells were defeated and dispersed. Seawater filled the first level of the gourd. All life and cultivators were submerged and exterminated by the violet sea's power. Hundreds of thousands of specters charged through the violet sea, sweeping the gourd's world. Gradually, an enormous spell formation emerged, a door leading to the second level. Simple and tightly closed, Meng Hao waved his hand toward the seawater. It formed a whirlpool that transformed the water and specters into a massive cyclone shooting toward the door. The cyclone erupted with massive force, shattering the door and destroying all seals and restrictions. When the door collapsed, fierce howls erupted from the second level. 2,000 Heavenly Pursuit tribe members appeared, including several nascent soul cultivators and totemic sacred ancients. As they charged out, the violet sea poured in, exterminating them with blood-curdling screams. The cries echoed out for a moment within the gourd and then faded away. Soon the entire mountain was completely quiet. The Heavenly Pursuit tribe had been completely eradicated. Yet Patriarch Huyan was nowhere to be seen within the gourd. Meng Hao frowned and snorted coldly. He waved his hand. The violet sea seethed and transformed back into the violet sea giants, which pummeled the mountain with their fists. The ground quaked as restrictive spells shattered. After half an incense stick burned, the mountain collapsed into ruin. As of this moment, the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's temple had been completely destroyed. Dust flew as the mountain collapsed. Meng Hao hovered above and slapped his bag of holding. Corpses poured out, forming a mountain of bodies that rose over the land. Leaves returned to the ground to become nourishment for roots. Rest in peace. Though you said you would not rest until the Golden Crow tribe was dead, your tribe has now been exterminated. All enmity is vanished. This place was your temple. Now your corpses are buried here. Meng Hao waved his sleeve, and huge chunks of the gourd mountain flew into the air, stacking around the corpses to form a tomb. Heavenly Pursuit Tomb. This tomb would stand forever, witnessing the Black Lands, striking terror into the hearts of all who inhabited these lands for years to come. It also bore witness to the rise of the Golden Crow tribe. When the tomb manifested, the streams of divine sense intensified. Meng Hao knew the scene was being observed by more than half the Black Lands tribes. Indeed, in nearly all Black Lands tribes, core formation stage cultivators and higher used treasures to observe Meng Hao. Meng Hao's return to the Black Lands made him famous throughout the Western Desert and Black Lands. He had risen to prominence as a patriarch, no longer just a nascent soul cultivator in seniority. How could the Black Lands not pay extra attention to him? Meng Hao gazed at the tomb, then turned to the sky. In the distance, a black cloud approached with indescribable speed. As the cloud neared, the sky darkened. Clouds consumed the day, transforming it into night. Meng Hao. As the night consumed the day, a deep voice rang, filled with a rancor that seemed to be etched upon the very bones of the speaker. It rang out like thunder from within the black night. Meng Hao gazed calmly at the approaching darkness, fierce light blazing in his eyes, battle lust surging within. Patriarch Huyan, he said calmly, directly entering the seventh anima. Boom! As the seven nascent souls combined, he grew taller by several heads, his body stronger, shoulders wider. His slender frame and bizarre demonic hair radiated the air of an immortal devil, shocking and audacious. The strength of his fleshly body caused the surrounding air to ripple and distort, as if the area around him was incompatible with the world. This intrepid fleshly body contained the prowess of 64 great circle nascent souls. Since ancient times, none like him had existed, and perhaps none ever would. He had forged a unique path, one of a kind throughout South Heaven. This was not a perfect nascent soul, but virtually the same. The sky was now completely black. A cloud shot directly toward Meng Hao, who didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, performing an incantation with his right hand before pointing forward. Wind, he said. An unspeakable gale erupted around him, raging in spinning winds from earth to heaven, appearing as an enormous tornado. The spinning winds shook everything and roared. They caught boulders and dust that shot toward the incoming cloud. During his battle with Patriarch Huyan's clone, he had used magical items and blood immortal divine abilities. However, he had never used his own creation, the magic of his 7 nascent soul totems, which was far more appropriate for him now. That was especially so now that he was in the 7th anima. His power was shocking in all respects. Massive roars spread throughout the Black Lands, shaking the tribes and filling cultivators' hearts with astonishment. This chapter was sponsored by Sebastian Weiss. Chapter 555, Who is He? A glowing screen appeared on an altar in the great demon butterfly tribe, displaying Meng Hao fighting Patriarch Huyan's true self. Du Lan sat calmly, watching everything unfold, her eyes glowing as she focused on Meng Hao. At the same time, in the great wild flame tribe, a similar screen could be seen. It was the same in the great cloud sky tribe, where Joe Deccan and others were watching the proceedings. Throughout the Black Lands, roughly 70% of the experts from the various tribes were all paying close attention to the fight. Spirit-severing patriarchs sent divine sense to circle the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's region, observing especially the divine abilities being used, particularly Meng Hao's. Booms rose into the air. When Meng Hao's tornado stretched high enough to touch Patriarch Huyan's night clouds, a huge explosion erupted. The clouds tore apart and the tornado collapsed. Patriarch Huyan suddenly appeared in midair. His face was ancient, vastly different from his middle-aged clone. His clothes were white and spotless. As he looked at Meng Hao, a spirit-severing expert's aura exploded from him. Meng Hao glanced back. During the earlier slaughter, he had secretly collected blood from various tribe members, enough to cover 5 generations and conjure a blood clone. If he could collect blood from Patriarch Huyan, he could form a 6th-generation Heavenly Pursuit blood clone. Although the Jai clan blood clone was mighty, this opportunity wouldn't come often. Meng Hao would seize it. His eyes flickered as he exploded out with the power of the seventh anima and 64 great circle nascent souls. As he closed in on Patriarch Huyan, he waved his right hand and said, "Metal." A blinding golden light appeared in the darkness, a glow of intense metal-type power targeting Patriarch Huyan. Patriarch Huyan said nothing, his face grim and eyes cold as he raised his hand and chopped toward the golden glow. In response to the chopping motion, the air in front of him was filled with intense coldness. It seemed to be a coldness that could extinguish will and sever emotions. This attack was none other than Patriarch Huyan's emotion severing. Meng Hao's eyes remained calm. The 7 violet sea giants roared and collapsed into a violet sea that surged toward him, clinging to his skin as a compressed water shield against the emotion-severing domain. The black night consumed Meng Hao's golden light. He raised his right hand and pointed again. Water. Blood and seawater, life and death, the will of extermination circulated around him. Patriarch Huyan snorted and formed an incantation, gesturing forward. Immediately, an intense power of expulsion shot out. Begone! The power of worldly expulsion hurtled at Meng Hao, slamming him backward with tremendous force. He coughed up blood, but his eyes shone brightly when he looked up. Patriarch Huyan's true self was far more powerful than his clone, casually employing abilities that the clone needed time to prepare. However, I have power I didn't use against your clone, thought Meng Hao. His eyes shining with strange light, he performed a double-handed incantation and pushed his hands forward. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, 7 totems activate. As he spoke, a green tree, reddish-violet sea, golden weapons, sea of flames, and frozen frost soil appeared in the air. A rock appeared, surrounded by raging winds. Above, snake-like silver bolts transformed into red lightning, congregating in midair. This was the divine ability Meng Hao had created, most suited to him, the 7 souls totem transformations. Perfectly suited to his 7th anima, they transformed into 7 bright beams that shot toward Patriarch Huyan. Patriarch Huyan stopped in his tracks, his eyes flickering as he traced a large circle in the air. 7 emotions and 6 pleasures, Tao of 13 transmigrations. Happiness, anger, sorrow, consideration, sadness, fear, shock, Tao of 7 emotions transmigrations. When the circle was completely traced in front of Patriarch Huyan, it shattered, becoming 7 parts. Each part was a different color and radiated bright light as it floated through the air. Patriarch Huyan pointed forward, causing the 7 emotions circle to shoot directly toward Meng Hao's 7 souls totems. Meng Hao's pupils constricted. This divine ability was new, but he wasn't surprised. Patriarch Huyan, a cunning fox, held back moves as Meng Hao had and was well prepared. The 7 souls totem transformation, the ultimate nascent soul art powered by 64 great circle nascent souls, collided with the 7 emotions transmigrations Tao, a spirit-severing ability. The two slammed together, the black night tearing apart as Meng Hao coughed up blood. He looked up, performed a double-handed incantation, and pointed forward. 7 totems combined. The 7 totems merged into one, a mass of primordial chaos that seemed to contain countless patterns within its formlessness. The 7 fused totems were most suitable for his 7th anima, with its 7 combined nascent souls. Inside were 7 fused nascent souls, outside, 7 combined totems. Interior and exterior in unison, his 64 great circle nascent souls could now fully explode with their true battle prowess. This was his most powerful trump card apart from the Agarwood, or dancing sword chi. His first time unleashing this magic. He had rehearsed mentally and now a roar rose into the heavens. 1 totem, 7 characteristics. Meng Hao's eyes widened. The 7 totem combination was unstable. I've rehearsed mentally, and with my 7 nascent souls merged, the combination shouldn't be unstable. His 5 elements were at great circle, but adding wind and lightning broke that harmony, causing the instability. When he had practiced mentally, he hadn't noticed. Now that the combination had manifested, it was obvious. Then, contrary to expectations, the wind and lightning stabilized, shocking Meng Hao. The 5 elements totems, transformations had been provoked by the wind and lightning, producing a completely unexpected transformation that would shock the entire world. Meng Hao's mind suddenly filled with sharp pain, his eyes going blank even mid-battle. He saw a battlefield littered with countless corpses, the ground soaked with blood. Battlefields for countless years seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Bodies carpeted the earth in every direction. Directly ahead lay a gigantic coffin, 30,000 or more meters long and pitch black. Meng Hao recognized it, the same one he had seen in the sky above the Tower of Tang in the state of Zhao. Most shocking, carved onto the coffin's surface were 9 butterflies. 9 butterflies, indescribably beautiful. When Meng Hao saw the butterflies, a roar filled his mind and the vision shattered. The black sky seemed to rip apart. Throughout South Heaven, eastern lands, southern domain, western desert, northern reaches, Meng Hao's 7 souls totem stirred a bizarre power into action. Beyond South Heaven, the carved names on the immortality bestowed dais flickered with shining light. Murmuring voices echoed around it. The 5 elements are fundamental. There is no 6th element in the world. Regardless of wind or lightning, both will turn the 5 elements upside down. Except this wind. What is this wind? This is not a wind of the 5 elements, this is wind from the outside world. And what lightning is this? It is not lightning of the 9 mountains and seas. It comes from outside the mountains and seas. How could this be? What is happening? Could it be that a life form from outside the 9 mountains and seas has descended, bringing this wind and lightning with it? The trembling of the immortality bestowed dais affected all the regions of South Heaven. A woman emerged from the rebirth cave, gazing into the distance. In the Milky Way Sea, an ancient boat drifted for tens of thousands of years. A corpse in decaying armor on its prow suddenly opened its eyes. In the great Tang's ancestral Jai clan mansion, a jade-skinned young man, who had once blocked Meng Hao's mother's path, sat on a cauldron altar. His eyes slowly opened, hesitation and confusion flickering within as he looked into the distance. Throughout all lands, everything shook mysteriously. Deep within the rebirth cave in the southern domain, in an area even the woman-form rock couldn't reach, lay a corpse in pitch darkness. This corpse was none other than he who had gifted Meng Hao with immortal shows the way. Chuman Tai. 1. Chuman Tai was the corpse that fell from the sky in Book 1. Meng Hao finally met him in person at the end of Book 3. The most relevant interaction between them occurred starting in Chapter 300. He had been dead, but now his eyes suddenly opened. Within them gleamed a sharp light capable of shaking the starry sky and crushing South Heaven. He seemed invulnerable, clearly at the peak of power. "Well, I woke up quickly," he said. "I came to spread the Tao, planting millions of seeds. In 200 years, only this person awoke. Perhaps this kid really is the one I've been waiting for all these years, to bring HM back to life." When Chuman Tai spoke him, recollection filled his expression as he recalled a man looking at him and smiling. Chapter 556, Shaking Huyan. Meng Hao noticed the incredible changes throughout South Heaven from his 7 souls totem combination, but Patriarch Huyan didn't. When Meng Hao regained consciousness, he looked at the 7 totems, the solitary primordial chaos totem. A strange light appeared in his eyes. Some undetectable transformation had occurred to his nascent souls and totems. Whether the transformation was good or bad, he couldn't tell. Yet he sensed it had placed him on the true path of 7 nascent souls. Up to now, entering the 7th anima allowed him to unleash 64 great circle nascent souls, but he had to force them to fuse. Only his profound foundation enabled this. The totem combination's instability revealed his oversight. However, a strange aura emerged from his totems, binding them together and stabilizing the combination. Meng Hao had solved a problem that would have led to danger. In the midst of battle with Patriarch Huyan, he had little time to ponder. Putting the matter aside, he performed a double-handed incantation. The solitary totem pulsated with a shocking aura. The totem had no fixed shape, constantly shifting. The primordial chaos within looked like droplets of water, yet also like a sea of flames, blurry and impossible to see clearly. However, the aura spreading from within the blurriness continued to grow more powerful. Patriarch Huyan was astonished, as were the streams of divine sense from the patriarchs of the other tribes. The instant the 7 nascent soul totems combined, Patriarch Huyan's eyes flickered with shock. He once again drew circles in front of him, and then gestured forward sharply. The 7 emotions are needed by the heart, but within the soul there are only 3 types of emotion: family love, friendship, and romantic love. I severed family love, extinguished friendship, and cut off romantic love. From then on I was emotionless. With that, the 7 circles of emotion shattered, transforming into a blade. The blade, illusory yet capable of extinguishing all life, lifted high and descended onto the solitary combination totem. The chopping blow was imbued with an aura that could conquer mountains and rivers, a blade of emotionlessness. All of Patriarch Huyan's cultivation transformed into a spirit-severing blade that could shake heaven and earth, the resplendent glow consuming the world as it shot toward Meng Hao's totem. The blade struck the totem. An indistinct aura erupted from it, causing the wind and clouds to cease moving. Everything above and below grew still. Strange, otherworldly feelings spread out with incredible intensity. When Patriarch Huyan sensed it, his heart filled with shock. Incredible pressure weighed down upon him, and his heart began to pound. The feeling came too quickly, leaving him unprepared. His mind filled with roaring, and blood oozed from his mouth. Cracks spread across the blade as it struck the totem, joining together before it shattered into 7 pieces shooting in all directions. The 7 pieces represented the 7 emotions, and their shattering caused a tremor to run through Patriarch Huyan's body. He coughed up a huge mouthful of blood, and his face went pale. He staggered backward more than 30 meters, then looked up in shock and disbelief. He had ceased looking down upon Meng Hao, yet only now did he realize he didn't fully understand him. The sight of 7 totems combining and the resulting aura left Patriarch Huyan profoundly shocked. What totem is that? What is that aura? It wasn't just Patriarch Huyan who felt his heart trembling. Equally shaken were the other spirit-severing patriarchs who had gathered to watch the battle. One of those patriarchs was the red-robed boy from the Great Cloud Sky sect. His eyes shone with a strange light, and his stream of divine sense quivered. Where did this guy come from? He thought. Even I would be shaken by that aura. The spirit-severing patriarchs from the Wild Flame tribe and Demon Butterfly tribe communicated silently, dispensing with any plan to sneak attack. The totem's aura was shocking and unfathomable. Patriarch Huyan was in full retreat. Meng Hao's totem gradually faded, not destroyed, untouched by the blade. It faded because even in the 7th anima, he couldn't sustain it long, only a handful of breaths, different from his estimate. Only 3 breaths of time, he sighed, his eyes shining. Internally, 7 nascent souls combined for the 7th anima. Externally, 7 totems form primordial chaos, my solitary totem. Either alone can sustain for long, but when both peak simultaneously, it lasts only 3 breaths. During those 3 breaths, my battle prowess, Meng Hao panted, recalling what he had experienced. Then he looked back at Patriarch Huyan. Patriarch Huyan breathed deeply. As he shot backward, he tapped his foot in the air. A boom echoed as he stopped, diffusing the recoil. He looked at Meng Hao and smiled. A nascent soul cultivation base that can shake the spirit-severing stage. If you had enough time, who knows, you might actually be able to achieve immortal ascension in South Heaven. But I will use all the power I possess to smash you to death. Regardless of whether or not I succeed, the process will give birth to Dao fruit. I can enjoy that flavor even in the Yellow Springs. Patriarch Huyan laughed and slapped his chest. Boom! The slap caused Patriarch Huyan's aura to explode, growing intense. His hair turned from white to black, his skin from withered to sleek and smooth. He transformed from old to middle-aged, dignified, then young as his aura grew more shocking. His black robe, sharp slanted eyebrows, and star-bright eyes showed his recovered youth. His aura shook the heavens, dimming everything and kicking up a tremendous wind. Meng Hao's eyes narrowed as this indescribable, formless aura exploded out from Patriarch Huyan. The handful streams of spirit-severing divine sense were now all looking at Patriarch Huyan. The great circle of the first severing, said the spirit-severing patriarch from the Wild Flame tribe. He was a tall, stalwart old man, within whose eyes could be seen an expression of intense concentration. Patriarch Huyan never reached the Great Circle before, said the red-robed boy from the Great Cloud Sky tribe. He used the eradication of his tribe to complete the Great Circle. Cold-blooded, this Huyan Yunaming. The boy looked at Patriarch Huyan with a frown. Meanwhile, in the other tribes in the Black Lands who were observing the goings-on, most of the cultivators weren't able to tell the exact extent to which Patriarch Huyan's aura had grown. However, it was shocking to them nonetheless. In the Cloud Sky tribe, Zhou Dekun's eyes widened with nervousness. After learning of Meng Hao's return, joy mingled with worry. In the Demon Butterfly tribe, Duo Lan gazed at Meng Hao, a stubborn gleam in her eyes. Over 100 years she had learned much about him. A chosen herself, she couldn't deny the vast distance between them. When Patriarch Huyan's cultivation base exploded to the great circle of the first severing, all watching, patriarchs and cultivators alike, were thoroughly shaken. Strong desire to battle suddenly ignited in Meng Hao. A moment later, though, he frowned. From his bag of holding, he sensed the demon spirit's teleportation power, ready to whisk him away at any moment. He couldn't stop it, but neither ignore it. He slapped his bag, producing the blood-colored mask and slipping it on. The mastiff howled and transformed into a red beam shooting toward him. The red light fused into the mask, Meng Hao's robes whipping about as his aura burst out violently. The eruption caught every spirit-severing patriarch's attention and all observers from the Black Lands. Amidst the roaring sound, Meng Hao's robes became blood-red, as did his hair. A glow of blood surrounded him, and behind him, a red throne appeared. Seated there was a woman wearing a mask identical to Meng Hao's. As she became visible, she sat down coldly onto the throne. The blood immortal. In this moment, the entire world was crimson. Even people who were merely watching the scene on a screen suddenly felt as if all the blood in their bodies wished to burst out. Meng Hao looked up, an oppressive glow in his eyes. When Meng Hao looked up, the youthful patriarch Huyan's eyes glinted with killing intent and hesitation. He too had a demon spirit sensing teleportation power, causing him to waver about continuing. After all, now that he had reached the great circle of the first severing of spirit severing, it meant that there were some incredibly important things for him to do in the primordial demon immortal plane. There was little time to consider the matter, though. Meng Hao's aura was incredibly shocking. Their gazes locked and they both began to move. Rumbling filled the air as they unhesitatingly slammed into each other. Area fought area. Domain fought domain. Divine abilities fought divine abilities. This was nothing like the fighting from before. This was spirit-severing carnage. That was especially true of Meng Hao's blood immortal divine abilities. He had almost been able to slaughter Patriarch Huyan's clone with them. As of now, he instantly employed them. Deadly sundered clouds roiled out in all directions, filling the sky with rumbling sounds. A blood rain fell, and a violet sea raged. Even more shocking to Patriarch Huyan was that Meng Hao's battle prowess was actually greater than when he had fought his clone. Furthermore, in the middle of all his mightiness, Patriarch Huyan could, for the first time, sense faith power. Then he recalled that the person before him was a cultivator, but also a totemic sacred ancient who could absorb faith power. This faith power made Meng Hao's battle prowess even more explosive, absurdly powerful. It was powerful enough that it could fight back against the first severing. Damn it, I forgot that he's a totemic sacred ancient who can absorb faith power, thought Patriarch Huyan. This time, he's much closer to his tribe, not far, far away like last time. That means the faith power is much stronger. Before, in the Violet Sea, the great distance made the faith power incredibly weak. The best place to kill him would be a place where he can't absorb faith power. Even as he mused in shock over these matters, they continued to fight back and forth. Patriarch Huyan relentlessly employed divine abilities, used emotion severing, his spirit immortal, and various magical techniques. At the same time, the spirit-severing spectators could also sense the faith power in Meng Hao, which caused them to gasp. Their minds could not help but be shaken. Even I overlooked Meng Hao's other identity, said the red-robed boy, a strange look gleaming in his eyes. He's a totemic sacred ancient. He suddenly had an idea. A person like Meng Hao was someone he should make friends with. The best thing to do would be to send charcoal during snowy weather, so to speak, and provide some timely help. That would be the best way to forge deeper ties. All of the spirit-severing experts in the area were having similar thoughts. In fact, all of the cultivators in the 70% of the Black Lands tribes who were watching were nervously thinking the same thing. Subai of the Black Dragon tribe was now an old man. After the Black Dragon tribe broke away from the Golden Crow tribe, they joined the Great Demon Talisman tribe. As of this moment, the majority of the Demon Talisman tribe was gathered in their public square, watching the proceedings on a large screen. Subai sighed inwardly. Standing next to him was an effeminate man, a male cultivator who was gentle and soft, but also cold. This was none other than that Chen Mo of the Great Demon Talisman tribe, who was one of the ones who fought over the demon spirit that year in the realm of the Bridge Ruins. Having second thoughts, he asked, "This Meng Hao, he truly supersedes all of us." Subai was silent for a moment. Finally, he nodded his head and said, "Perhaps. As I look back, I don't think I made the right decision." In the Great Demon Butterfly tribe, Dual Land's wide eyes were fixed on Meng Hao. In the Great Cloud Sky tribe, Zhou Dekun was panting. Next to him was Zhao Fang, another member of the Great Cloud Sky tribe. He had a similar expression to Zhou Dekun. Roaring filled the air as the raging fight continued. Even as the two of them fought back and forth fiercely, each of them could sense the other's demon spirit. In fact, whenever they got closer to each other, the power of teleportation grew stronger. Patriarch Huyan's eyes flashed with killing intent. The power of teleportation was pulsating out of his demon spirit with increased frequency, almost as if it were urging him to finish the fight more quickly. The desire in his heart to kill Meng Hao had reached its pinnacle. He suddenly raised his hand skyward. "Heavenly pursuit," he roared. As the words echoed out, a crackling like that of thunder could be heard in the sky. "Heavenly pursuit," he roared a second time. Shocking claps of thunder could be heard, and his body grew slightly indistinct. A savage and unmatchably brutal aura roared out of him. "Heavenly pursuit," he shouted a third time. The sky above suddenly seemed to rip apart as a colossal three-headed anaconda bored out from within the void. The anaconda was fully 30,000 meters long and violet in color. The three heads radiated cruelty and had forked tongues that flicked in and out. Furthermore, each head sported a long horn. The instant it appeared, intense pressure bore down onto the black lands. This was not a spirit-severing aura, nor was it the aura of Tao seeking. This was the aura of an immortal. This violet-colored, three-headed beast was shockingly equipped with immortal will. Its appearance instantly filled the land with thunderous roaring. Conversations instantly broke out. "Heavenly Pursuit Dragon Snake." "That's the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's bloodline ancestor, the Heavenly Pursuit Dragon Snake." According to the legends, every Western Desert tribe has a bloodline that traces back to an immortal. As the legacies get passed down through the generations, there is always a small chance to set off the bloodline and be able to summon the ancestor. The surrounding spirit-severing experts were not shocked by this development, but when the cultivators from the other cities in the Black Lands saw, most were completely astonished. As roaring filled the Black Lands, Patriarch Huyan began to bleed from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. The summoning he had just performed had put quite a strain on him. It was as if this world did not consent to the appearance of such a beast as this. As the three-headed anaconda approached, an enormous illusory net appeared around it. This net appeared to be some sort of natural law, something seemingly unbreakable and unblockable. The Heavenly Pursuit Dragon Snake roared and struggled, and blood sprayed from Patriarch Huyan's mouth. Finally, for a fourth time, he shouted, "Heavenly Pursuit." Boom! The 6 eyes of the Heavenly Pursuit Dragon Snake glittered. With a mere glance, they sent Meng Hao's mind completely reeling. At the same time, the centermost head suddenly bit down on its own tail and then ripped it off. The severed tail suddenly began to blaze with fire. In the blink of an eye, the burning power broke through the enormous illusory net. Even as the giant net tightened around the Heavenly Pursuit Dragon Snake, it flung its tail directly toward Patriarch Huyan. It burned as it flew through the air, scorching away the flesh and blood, purifying the tail until it was only bones. By the time it reached Patriarch Huyan, shockingly, it had transformed into a violet-colored bone whip. It floated there in midair, just waiting for Patriarch Huyan to take control of it. It undulated slowly, sending out ripples into the air along with cracking sounds. The air around the whip continuously shattered in successive layers. A terrifying, almost infinitely powerful aura instantly exploded out from the snake tail. All of this takes quite some time to describe, but actually only 5 breaths of time had passed during the fight between Meng Hao and Patriarch Huyan. Patriarch Huyan reached out excitedly toward the floating whip to grab it. The whip was obviously a precious treasure. Meng Hao and the surrounding spirit-severing experts in divine sense form could all sense this. The streams of divine sense undulated greedily. However, their greed quickly vanished, to be replaced with pity. This particular precious treasure might be mighty, but it was a bloodline treasure. Objects such as that could only be used by members of the Heavenly Pursuit bloodline. Furthermore, even ordinary bloodline members would be unable to use it. Only people in whose veins the blood ran thick and pure would be able to, and that was only after reaching the spirit-severing stage. Anyone else who attempted to do so would receive grievous injury. With so many restrictions on the snake bone whip, the precious treasure became an object of little value to spectators, as valuable as chicken ribs. However, when Meng Hao saw it, his eyes shone with a strange light. While others might view it as nothing more valuable than chicken ribs, that was not the case with him. Meng Hao had not just eradicated the entire Heavenly Pursuit tribe. During the slaughter, he had retrieved some blood samples. That blood contained 5 successive generations of Heavenly Pursuit tribe members. If he could get some blood from Patriarch Huyan, then he would have 6 generations of blood and could create a 6th-generation blood clone. Furthermore, it wouldn't be an ordinary blood clone but rather a blood spirit. If he could get 9 generations of blood, it would be a blood divinity with the potential for ancestral awakening. Whatever happened, if he made such a blood clone, then it would be able to wield the snake bone whip. After all these thoughts passed through his head, he finally said, "I have to risk it." As Patriarch Huyan reached out to grab the snake bone whip, Meng Hao's eyes began to glow with a light that would make anyone who saw it feel a sense of danger. He took a step forward and raised his hand. Filled with determination, he pointed at Patriarch Huyan. Demon Sealing 8th Hex. When the divine ability appeared, it caused Patriarch Huyan to be entwined with invisible demonic chi. Instantly, a tremor ran through him. "This move again," said Patriarch Huyan, his face growing dark. He had considered many methods for dealing with the strange divine ability, but none were truly capable of standing up against it. The only thing he could do was to be on the lookout for it. At the moment, he was sealed, but it would only last for half a breath. Then, the strands of demonic chi would begin to fall apart. Blood sprayed from Meng Hao's mouth. In half a breath's worth of time, he was only able to get within a few dozen meters of the snake bone whip. Patriarch Huyan, on the other hand, was only about 7 inches away, well within reach. The surrounding spirit-severing experts as well as the other observing cultivators were watching closely as Patriarch Huyan seemed about to lay his hand onto the snake bone whip. There were many who had already guessed what Meng Hao was trying to do. Some still hadn't figured it out and were slightly confused. It was in this exact moment that Meng Hao suddenly opened his mouth. A black light flew out at incredible speed, kicking up a powerful wind. The black light immediately transformed into a black-colored wheel. This was the Wheel of Time. At the same time, Meng Hao's wooden time swords appeared and began to rotate around the wheel. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the Wheel of Time began to spin. Instantly, the power of time reversal erupted out. A tremor ran through Patriarch Huyan's mind. His face twisted, and he was about to struggle against it when suddenly his body, completely beyond his own control, began to move backward. It was as if time were reversing. Even as Patriarch Huyan fought back against the power, Meng Hao once again used his demon sealing powers, injuring himself in the process. Bang! Patriarch Huyan's body trembled as he suddenly lost his cultivation base. It was only for a moment, but that, combined with the time reversal, pushed him half a meter away from the snake bone whip. As for Meng Hao, he transformed into a green smoke. Coughing up blood the whole time, he appeared in front of the snake bone whip. Eyes filled with determination, he reached out and grabbed it. This chapter was sponsored by Sebastian Y. Anonymous Mitchell Campbell Graham Kim. Chapter 558. In 1,000 years, one person can reach immortal ascension. "How dare you?" roared Patriarch Huyan. His body flickered as he shook off the power of the time reversal and then shattered Meng Hao's 8th demon sealing hex. Patriarch Huyan's eyes were filled with scorn. He actually wasn't worried about the snake bone whip being taken away. It had been refined from a bloodline ancestor of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Other than people of that particular bloodline, no one could use it. Even back in the time before the Heavenly Pursuit tribe had been eradicated, Patriarch Huyan would still have been the only one qualified to activate the bloodline power to use the precious treasure. There was no need to even mention the current circumstances. Therefore, Patriarch Huyan wasn't anxious at all. In fact, he acted a bit playfully, ignoring the snake bone whip and instead raising his right hand to summon a divine ability which then shot directly toward Meng Hao. Backlash from the Wheel of Time and the 8th hex slammed into Meng Hao, causing blood to spray from his mouth. His face was pale as his blood immortal spirit-severing state vanished. The blood-colored mask fell off of his face, and the weakened mastiff appeared. Meng Hao's cultivation base dropped from spirit-severing back into the 7th anima. However, the expression of determination and resolve on his face did not lessen, but rather grew more intense. He closed in on the snake bone whip and then grabbed it, the first person to have ever done so. The instant he touched it, his heart trembled. An intense tremor ran through his body, the source being the snake bone whip. Having examined him and found that he didn't possess the requisite bloodline to control it, it seemed to feel as if it were tainted. The entire whip filled with a shocking, explosive power of destruction. "Looking to kill yourself, huh?" said Patriarch Huyan, his scorn deepening. His divine ability spread out, clearly on the verge of slamming into Meng Hao. The surrounding spirit-severing experts were all confused. When the cultivators observing throughout the Black Lands saw what was happening, expressions of disbelief appeared on their faces. "What is he doing?" thought Duolan. "Why would he possibly decide to do that?" Jodekun grew increasingly nervous and was almost unable to restrain himself from shouting out, "Junior brother, what's wrong with you? How could you be so insensible? Of what use is that whip to you?" Subai's eyes were wide and Chen Mo's pupils constricted. They exchanged a glance and could instantly see the confusion in each other's eyes. "From what I know of him," said Subai in a resolute voice that could sever nails and chop iron, "he never takes action unless he's confident of success." A tremor ran through Chen Mo's heart. "Don't tell me, he actually has a way to use the heavenly pursuit snake bone whip." Such a possibility seemed inconceivable. Even if he does, how could he possibly evade Patriarch Huyan's current deadly counterattack? Even as everyone was shocked, even as the backlash from the snake bone whip surged, even as Patriarch Huyan's divine ability closed in, Meng Hao suddenly slapped his bag of holding to produce his demon spirit. He violently crushed it, causing the demon spirit to explode into innumerable dots of glittering light that spread out to cover his body. As for the parrot and meat jelly, they had disappeared into the copper mirror as soon as the fight began, so the light covered them as well. It spread out to the mastiff too, and they all began to turn transparent. The backlash from the snake bone whip pierced through the air, passing completely through Meng Hao. Patriarch Huyan's divine ability actually reached him, but by that time he was illusory, so it passed directly through. The surrounding streams of spirit-severing divine sense were thoroughly shaken. They watched as Meng Hao rapidly vanished, along with the Heavenly Pursuit tribe's precious treasure. The experts from the other Black Lands tribes who were watching on various screens all gasped. Strange light shone from their eyes. All of a sudden, they were struck even more deeply than before by Meng Hao's methods. "So that was his plan," said Chen Mo, his eyes narrowing. Inwardly, he had to admit that Meng Hao's tactics were excellently planned. Subai said nothing, but inwardly he mused. Maybe he simply wanted the whip. Or more likely, since he knew the battle was about to end, he took it as a means of ensuring the safety of the Golden Crow tribe. Jodekun breathed a sigh of relief. As for Zhao Fang of the Great Cloud Sky tribe, he was mentally shaken and his expression flickered. He looked down at his bag of holding as his own demon spirit flew out. It transformed into dots of flickering light which began to surround his body. A demon spirit also flew out in front of Du Lan. The glittering lights slowly spread out over her body, causing her to fade away. The power of teleportation emanated out all around her. Meanwhile, back where Meng Hao and Patriarch Huyan were fighting. As Meng Hao slowly disappeared, he looked at Patriarch Huyan and calmly said, "Patriarch Huyan, it would be impolite of me to refuse your gift. You also have a demon spirit. I'll be waiting for you in the primordial demon immortal plane to continue our battle." Patriarch Huyan glared at him with bloodshot eyes. His desire to kill grew even more intense. The Heavenly Pursuit snake bone whip was a precious treasure of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe, and had been intended as a trump card for use in the primordial demon immortal plane. In fact, one of his main goals in the primordial demon immortal plane had been to find a similar article that could be used alongside the whip. Together, those two items would help him to begin looking for clues regarding his second severing. By now, Patriarch Huyan's fury was at a pinnacle, and his hatred had seeped into his bones. Not only had Meng Hao stolen the Wheel of Time from his clone, but had also stolen this precious treasure from his true self. For these things to happen to a spirit-severing cultivator, and in front of all those other cultivators from the Black Lands, was a galling shame and a deep humiliation. He suppressed his rage and coldly said, "Taking my treasure, I'll eradicate your Golden Crow tribe." "Too late," replied Meng Hao coolly. Patriarch Huyan's face flickered as, of its own volition, his demon spirit flew out of his bag of holding, radiating rapid pulses of light. It transformed into countless dots of glittering light which enveloped Patriarch Huyan and caused him to begin to fade away. "By the way," continued Meng Hao, "contact with the demon spirit makes the teleportation power activate faster." Patriarch Huyan breathed deeply, his expression calm as he stared at Meng Hao. Without another word, his body flickered as more power of teleportation surged. Then, in the blink of an eye, he activated the teleportation, transforming into a beam of light that shot upward and then disappeared amidst a surge of teleportation ripples that spread out in all directions. The look he gave Meng Hao before disappearing caused Meng Hao's brow to furrow. It was at this point that a voice transmitted by divine will could be heard in Meng Hao's mind. It came from the direction of the streams of spirit severing divine sense, and belonged to none other than the red-robed boy from the great cloud sky tribe. Fellow Taoist Meng, please proceed without worry. I will watch over the Golden Crow tribe for the time being. By this point, Meng Hao's body was more than half faded. He was unable to control the speed with which he moved upward, so he was forced to look down toward the collection of spirit-severing divine sense streams. I've grown old, said the voice, and I've long since given up on the thought of performing my second severing. I just hope that the great cloud sky tribe will continue on as long as I live, and that I will have the chance to see someone else reach the second severing. I'll help you by taking care of the Golden Crow tribe. With me around, no one will dare to provoke them. However, you must promise me that while you are in the primordial demon immortal plane, you will take care of my holy son Zhao Fang. Meng Hao was silent for a moment. Then, just before rocketing up into the heavens, he responded via divine will. I will take no responsibility for his death if the situation exceeds my capabilities. Just take care of him as best you can, responded the red-robed boy, his tone casual. I trust that you will keep your word. Meng Hao didn't respond. He would by no means refuse such an offer. A rumbling sound could be heard as he was propelled up at high speed into the boundless sky. In the last moment before he disappeared, he looked back down at the lands beneath. He could see the black lands, including the area occupied by the Golden Crow tribe. He could also see 4 bright beams of light shooting up at high speed. One of those beams of light contained Zhao Fang of the Great Cloud Sky tribe. Another was Dual Lan of the Demon Butterfly tribe, with whom Meng Hao was somewhat familiar. The third was an old man. There didn't seem to be anything special about the old man, but shockingly, he was of the spirit-severing stage. Strangest of all, he was not flying up from the Black Lands, but rather from a position in the southern domain where it bordered the Black Lands. The 4th beam of light came up from some distance away in the western desert Violet Sea. Meng Hao couldn't see who was inside, but in his estimation, it was most likely Xianxia. He looked away. It was at this moment, just before he disappeared, that a tremor ran through his mind as he looked toward the southern domain. From that direction, Meng Hao could see a 5th beam of light. However, it was so far away that he was unable to see clearly who was inside. However, he had the faint sense that there was not just one beam of teleportation light rising up from the southern domain. There were more. I wonder who from the southern domain will be going to the primordial demon immortal plane. Meng Hao was curious, even excited at the prospect of encountering some of his old friends. It was at this moment that he completely vanished. Although Meng Hao couldn't sense it, people were teleporting from more regions than just the southern domain and the Black Lands. In the vast eastern lands, beams of light were also visible, shooting up into the sky. 3 came from the Fang clan. The beams of light shooting up from the Fang clan were 2 men and 1 woman. The woman was none other than the one who had left a deep impression on Meng Hao. It was violent-tempered, overbearing. Fang Yu. 1. Meng Hao met Fang Yu in the events surrounding the Immortal's corpse in Chapter 309. She reappeared in Chapter 425 and 426, after Meng Hao's karma was almost severed by Jai 19. In the Jai clan ancestral mansion, an illusory youth stood atop the highest point of the main temple, looking down at a group of 9 people, 5 men and 4 women, all of whom wore expressions of deep respect. A sparkling demon spirit glow was currently beginning to surround them. The power of teleportation rumbled loudly, but the gaze of the illusory youth prevented them from moving upward even a bit. The primordial demon immortal plane opens once every 1,000 years, he said. Because of the western desert Violet Sea, only cultivators from the lands of South Heaven can participate, not anyone from the other 3 planets. The opening of this ancient plane also indicates that the millennial struggle for immortality has begun. According to the rules of the 9th mountain and sea, on each planet, every 1,000 years, 1 person is permitted to achieve immortal ascension. When the struggle for immortality begins, the immortality bestowal dais will slowly awaken. It will automatically suppress the various Tao-seeking experts, using the threat of death to prevent them from engaging in battle for the path to immortality. Of course, there are always bound to be fish who slip through the net, people who risk their lives to fight for their goal. Although the path to immortality exists in front of all of you, you will face opponents. Those opponents are not just fellow cultivators of your own generation. There will also be members of the older generation, spirit-severing and Tao-seeking experts. All of them wish to tread the path of immortal ascension during these 1,000 years. The coming millennium will be very interesting. Many people will fight, all will fail except for one. That one person will achieve immortal ascension. Those who gain fortune in the primordial demon immortal plane will be a step ahead of the others on the path to immortality. It is my hope that during this 1,000 years, the person to achieve immortal ascension will be from the Jai clan. With that, the youth waved his hands. The bodies of the 9 others trembled as power of teleportation exploded out, and they surged up into the sky. All of the members of the Jai clan who were on their way to the primordial demon immortal plane were chosen. However, these were not clan members like the one Meng Hao had killed that year, of the quasi-ray. Rather, these were full-array chosen. Teleportation beams could also be seen above the northern reaches. Obviously, the opening of the primordial demon immortal plane was not exclusive to the western desert. It was a matter of extreme importance to all the lands of South Heaven. It was a grand gathering of chosen from the southern domain, western desert, eastern lands, and northern reaches. 1. Before this chapter, the northern reaches was actually called the northern desert. As of this chapter, it was changed to northern reaches. I've since gone back to all previous chapters to change northern desert to northern reaches. This indicated that as of this moment, the path to immortality had opened. Note, this is the April Fool's chapter that initially went live and is not part of the story. Read it for fun, or just skip on to chapter 559. Chapter 558, Heads. How dare you, roared Patriarch Huyan. His body flickered as he shook off the power of the time reversal and shattered Meng Hao's 8th demon sealing hex. Patriarch Huyan's eyes filled with scorn. He actually wasn't worried about the snake bone whip being taken away. It had been refined from a bloodline ancestor of the Heavenly Pursuit tribe. Other than people of that bloodline, no one could use it. Even back before the Heavenly Pursuit tribe had been eradicated, Patriarch Huyan would still have been the only one qualified to activate the bloodline power to use the precious treasure. There was no need to even mention the current circumstances. Besides, the backlash power that would be levied against any outsider who touched the whip made him completely confident. With a cold chuckle, he backed up, allowing Meng Hao to near the whip, and at the same time, preparing a divine ability to unleash against him. The instant Meng Hao's hand fell onto the snake bone whip, a feeling like sparks of electricity began to race up his hand and into his arm. He instantly frowned, and his face grew pale. The tingling feeling quickly turned into pain, like that of hundreds of knives stabbing into his hand and forearm. He tried to release his grip, but was shocked to find that he was unable. It was as if his hand were stuck onto the snake bone whip, unable to release it. Meng Hao gritted his teeth once again, tried to shake away the snake bone whip. The pain was now becoming intolerable. His face was pale white and blood seeped out of the corners of his mouth. Suddenly, an incredible power surged out, starting from the tip of the whip, and then growing like a tidal wave of force as it shot toward his arm. Meng Hao felt a sense of deadly crisis sweep over him. The power of the snake bone whip was beyond anything he had ever faced up against before. After all, this was the power of an immortal. Although he had fought Patriarch Huyan's clone, as well as Patriarch Huyan's true self, he had never even crossed paths with a Tao-seeking expert, let alone a true immortal. He knew that such power could instantly shatter him, body and soul, and even destroy his nascent souls. In the blink of an eye, the power reached his hand, causing it to explode into a haze of blood and gore. As the power continued up his arm, bursting flesh, crushing bone, Meng Hao knew that he was moments away from being exterminated. He quickly slapped his bag of holding to produce an ordinary flying sword. Without hesitation, he slashed at his right shoulder, severing his right arm completely. Shooting backward at top speed, he watched as the power of the snake bone whip turned what remained of his right arm into nothing more than a haze of blood which quickly faded away. It was at this point that Patriarch Huyan pushed down hard onto his forehead, spitting up a mouthful of soul blood. He quickly performed a double-handed incantation which caused the blood to turn black. It then spread out to form an enormous beaded net. The net moved with incredible speed as it expanded, threatening to envelop Meng Hao. In the blink of an eye, his path of escape was completely cut off. Patriarch Huyan chuckled. My blood time net is faster than a second severing cultivator. I don't care what power-up magic you have, you could never evade it. Meng Hao's mind raced as he tried to think of what few options he had left. There simply wasn't enough time to consider, though. The net was now on the verge of completely covering him. It was in this moment that, shockingly, a huge fissure appeared in midair directly between Patriarch Huyan and Meng Hao. The fissure spread out with shocking speed and emanated a blinding, glittering light. A fearsome aura exploded out of it that caused even Patriarch Huyan's face to go pale. It seemed something beyond comprehension, almost like the might of the heavens themselves. The light spread out to slash into the black-colored blood net, instantly shredding it into countless pieces, which then became nothing more than ash on the wind. Blood sprayed from Patriarch Huyan's mouth as his connection to the net was severed, and he instantly backed up, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Meng Hao also stared in shock, having no clue whatsoever regarding the origin of this strange fissure. Deathly silence filled the area. The only thing that could be heard was a faint pulsing sound coming from within the fissure. A long moment passed, in which everyone observing felt their hearts pounding. It was at this point that the cold voice of a woman echoed out from within the fissure, filled with incredible power. "You dare to harm my son." The voice contained such power that Patriarch Huyan was instantly sent tumbling backward, his face filled with astonishment. Suddenly, a hand could be seen emerging from the fissure. It was as smooth as jade, completely beautiful to the extreme. The hand was followed by an arm and then a face. A woman emerged from the fissure, her eyes blazing with fury and her right hand clenched into a fist. Her hair whipped about her and her robes flapped violently. As soon as she emerged, the fissure closed behind her, letting out a sound like a thunderclap, as well as a violent, rushing wind that sent Patriarch Huyan tumbling backward yet again. The woman stared around coldly. This was none other than Meng Li. The day Jai 19 attempted to sever Meng Hao's karma, she flew into a rage and directly attacked the Jai clan. As of this moment, her killing intent soared to the heavens. "You paltry western desert cretin," she said. "You just poked a bear cub, but what you failed to realize is that the bear cub is actually the adopted child of a fire-breathing dragon. Right now, that dragon has the thirst for blood." "Fellow Taoist, Patriarch Huyan tried to gush an explanation, but before he could, Meng Li's body flickered, and she was directly in front of him. "You dare to speak to me," she said. She slowly reached out and flicked her finger. The flicking finger slammed into Patriarch Huyan's face, causing his head to instantly explode. The force of the explosion rippled out, destroying his body and shattering his nascent divinity. The shockwave created by his death caused ripples to spread out in all directions. Many nearby beasts were instantly destroyed by the intense power. Meng Hao, however, seemed to be strangely shielded. In the blink of an eye, this spirit-severing patriarch, someone who could inspire fear into the hearts of everyone watching, was destroyed in body and soul. The observing streams of divine sense were completely shocked. That aura, that's not spirit-severing, is not even Tao-seeking. Just who is this person? Jodekun's face drained of blood, junior brother. Duolan was trembling visibly. The rest of the cultivators in the other cities in the Black Lands all had similar reactions. Even through the screens upon which they were watching the battle, it was possible to tell that this woman was no ordinary cultivator. Meng Li slowly turned to look at Meng Hao. "Well, hello," she said. Meng Hao's heart was pounding. "Who are you?" he asked. She chuckled. "I've finally come for you. The time has come for something to happen, my son." "Son," replied Meng Hao. His mind reeled. This woman couldn't possibly be his mother. Meng Li lifted up her hand, within which appeared a bag of holding. "I have something for you," she said, tossing the bag over to him. Meng Hao frowned as he snatched the bag of holding out of the air. When he looked inside, his mind filled with a roaring sound, and waves of shock rippled out through his body. The bag was filled with severed heads. He turned it over numbly, watching in horror as the head of a woman tumbled out. He recognized this woman. It was none other than the woman who was for all intents and purposes his beloved, Xianxia of the Song clan. Even as the head fell downward, another head rolled out of the bag. It was Xianxia Shan of the Frigid Snow clan, who had professed her feelings toward him underneath the moonlight. After that was Han Bei, the only woman who could possibly match wits with him. And then Chu Yuyan who had such complicated feelings for him. Meng Hao's heart seized, and the blood completely drained from his face. However, the worst was yet to come. The final head to tumble out of the bag was none other than Su Qing, whose single tear had pulled him back from the midst of demonic transmigration. Su Qing, who had saved him from being slain at the hands of the Jai clan quasi-array member. Su Qing, who had taken him from Mount Daqing, which led to his new life as a cultivator. Su Cheng, Su Cheng, Su Cheng. Meng Hao was completely at a loss for words. Roaring filled his mind, and his remaining hand began to tremble violently. His entire person filled with a sense of absolute coldness and emptiness. Surprised, said Meng Li. Don't worry, they died peacefully. I'm not a torturer. However, I couldn't let inferior quality woman have contact with my son. Meng Hao slowly looked over at Meng Li, his face filled with astonishment and disbelief. Currently, he felt as if his entire world had become a nightmare. Was it even real? Before he could say anything, Meng Li held up her hand. There's no need for questions. Watch. Meng Li started to chuckle and then laugh uproariously. Suddenly, a rumbling sound filled heaven and earth. Everything began to shake, and Meng Li's body trembled violently. Shockingly, vines exploded from her eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Her fleshly body appeared to be shredded in the blink of an eye as an enormous, seven-colored flower roared into existence. Maniacal laughter rang out in all directions as Meng Li then shouted, "The time has come. Awaken, my son." It was in this very moment that the resurrection lily exploded in attack. Meng Hao's mind was reeling and his heart virtually torn into pieces. He was completely caught off guard, thoroughly incapable of fighting back against the resurrection lily. It quickly seized control of his legs and arm, then his torso. By the time he realized what was happening and thought to fight back, the only thing left under his control was his head. But it was too late. In the blink of an eye, his entire body and self was possessed by the resurrection lily. Meng Hao was powerless to do anything except watch what was happening as his body looked at the flower form Meng Li and then spoke the words, "Hello, mother." Meng Hao wanted to scream, to rage, to fight back, but he was completely powerless. All he could do was let out a soundless howl that echoed out for him alone to hear. The enormous, seven-colored flower approached Meng Hao's body. Her voice was like a soft purr as she said, "At long last you're here." "I failed so many times in the past," Meng Hao heard his own voice saying. "It doesn't matter," she replied. "Why don't you assume your true form?" A roaring sound echoed up into the sky. Vines exploded out of the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth of Meng Hao's body. They stretched out, seemingly destroying his fleshly body in the blink of an eye. Moments later, a five-colored resurrection lily hovered there, swaying back and forth bizarrely. "That's better," said Meng Li. "We'll soon figure out what to do about the two other colors, and now to take care of this pesky Meng Hao." Suddenly, a tentacle-like vine snaked out to stab directly into the middle of the five-colored resurrection lily. The vine wrapped around Meng Hao's nascent soul and wrenched it out violently. Meng Hao felt incredible pain surrounding him. He realized that, at this moment, the only thing that remained of his true self was nothing more than this nascent soul. The vine pulled the struggling nascent soul until it hovered directly in front of the face of the seven-colored resurrection lily. "Your days of causing problems for my true son are over. I know exactly how to deal with an insect like you." Another tentacle flashed an incantation symbol, and suddenly, Meng Hao felt stabs of pain all over him. It felt like thousands of needles, not poking into but piercing out from within. He looked down in shock to see what appeared to be a sea of needles emerging from the surface of his nascent soul. This chapter was sponsored by Siwang Jijian. Chapter 559, and then there were three. Spoiler sneak peek below. "Enough of this ant," cried Meng Li. She forcibly tossed Meng Hao away. He tumbled through the air, vision spinning. Suddenly, a light almost like that of gold, except darker, covered his eyes. Somehow, he knew that he was being cast into the copper mirror. Everything went white, then black. When he could finally see again, everything was covered with a copper glow. The pain he had felt earlier was gone. When he looked down, he understood why. It was not needles that had been poking up out of the skin of his nascent soul, but rather hair, except it was thicker than hair, more like fur. His nascent soul was covered with thick, luxuriant fur that draped down onto the ground. He suddenly heard a voice behind him. "Well, what have we here?" Meng Hao's nascent soul turned to see the parrot walking toward him, a bright gleam in its eyes. Chapter 559, So We Meet Again, Ah Karma. Multiple beams of teleportation light shot up from the great lands of South Heaven, causing ripples to spread about in all directions. The sky trembled. Light of teleportation spread out, filling the firmament with brightness and causing the clouds to churn. For 3 full days in South Heaven, there was no night. For 3 days in the southern domain, black lands, northern reaches, and eastern lands, even in the Milky Way Sea, patriarchs in various sects and clans all looked up into the sky. All of them knew full well that as of this moment, the path of the struggle for immortality had fully opened. After the 3 bright days passed with no night, many people could sense that the spiritual energy in the lands of South Heaven was suddenly stronger. With the exception of the Western Desert, the spiritual energy in almost all locations increased by triple. There were even some places which experienced an explosive tenfold increase in spiritual energy, and other extremely special locations, where the increase approached the level of being terrifying. The lands of South Heaven were now vastly different than they had been before. The strength of the spiritual energy made cultivation easier. In fact, throughout the land, more than 100 spirit springs were restored from states of being dried up to that of explosive abundance. The strengthening of spiritual energy wasn't the only thing that happened. The natural law of heaven and earth seemed to have been diluted to the point where it almost seemed as if it could be rewritten. Although reaching such enlightenment would be very difficult for cultivators, the change made it so that it was easier to personally brand such shapeless laws. Most shocking of all was that when the night returned, the starry sky up above had changed slightly. Stars were in different positions, almost as if the starfield up above was a different one than before. When people looked up at it, they had the feeling they were back in ancient times. This was the true starry sky, and its appearance seemed to indicate that some sort of seal had been removed. As of now, immortals could appear in the lands of South Heaven. All of these various changes caused a huge stir among the cultivators of South Heaven. Most of them were either confused or pleasantly surprised. It was only in the eyes of some of the most powerful of experts that intense stubbornness suddenly shone forth. It was important to them, too, that this path to the struggle for immortality had opened. All of them had lived longer than 1,000 years and had experienced the previous struggle for immortality 1,000 years ago. After failing, they had no choice but to continue to wait until this day. There were even some among them who had lived, not for 1,000 years but for thousands. Those people weren't anxious. Having lived for so long, they knew that after the path to the struggle for immortality opened, the natural laws of heaven and earth would only continue to grow weaker as the end neared. Immortals would appear, and chances of success would grow greater. Therefore, although they were filled with expectation, they were not anxious. The great lands of South Heaven were thoroughly shaken. While all those things were happening down below, up in the boundless starry sky was a great river. The river was composed of innumerable, resplendent stars that surged through the sky. The stars that made up this great river were actually made up of uncountable motes and fragments. Within those motes and fragments were an assortment of a few dozen who were cultivators being teleported from the lands of South Heaven. Meng Hao was one of them. However, his eyes were closed and he wasn't moving. All of the other people in the river of stars were in exactly the same state. None of them could see each other and therefore didn't know who exactly made up the group that would enter the primordial demon immortal plane. An unknown period of time passed. The starry sky was calm and quiet. There was no aura, only the flowing river of stars. The group of people left planet South Heaven and gradually grew near to a place where Meng Hao had been before, the bridge of immortal treading. This collapsed bridge of immortality hung there among the stars just as it always had. It did nothing as the river of stars neared it, then began to pass it by. However, as the river of stars passed, suddenly, countless dots of light appeared on the surface of the bridge of immortality. They spread out throughout all the areas of the bridge, growing thick and dense, seemingly without end. However, their flickering seemed to be in accord with some pattern. Somewhere deep within the bridge of immortality, on a chunk of broken rock that no one could see, were 2 particular shining lights among the masses of others that bore the semblance of eyes. Imagine that you could solidify all of this into a physical picture and then zoom in on the bridge of immortality. What you would notice is that the vast chunks of rock were actually something like continents or land masses. If you zoomed in again, then you would see that in the very center of it all was a mountain. On top of that mountain were 2 dots of light that looked almost like electricity. Shockingly, they were 2 people. A man and a woman. The man was scholarly and refined. He wore a green robe and his expression was, for the most part, indifferent and blank, although it would occasionally shine with clarity of mind. The woman stood with her arms wrapped around the man. The blankness in her eyes was occasionally dispelled by a faint smile. This man was none other than Han Shan. Reborn Demon Emperor Han Shan. In this moment, his eyes suddenly became clear. He looked up into the sky and apparently could see that within the river of stars drifting past, among all the countless fragments of light that it contained, was a familiar face. "So we meet again," he said, his voice both light and hoarse. "Ah, karma." Although there was no loneliness to him anymore, he was just as bleak and desolate as before. Yet when he looked down at the woman next to him, the bleakness would transform into tenderness and a lack of regret. Xianxia lifted up his right hand and waved it toward the sky above. Instantly, all of the bridge slaves in the entire bridge of immortality lifted their heads up and roared a soundless roar. No outsider could hear the sound of their roars. Nonetheless, the sound shaped together into something completely shocking. It shot out from the realm of the bridge ruins, out of the bridge of immortality, and up toward the river of stars. It pierced into the river, shooting through the countless fragments of light and motes of dust until it found Meng Hao. "Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!" The roaring of the innumerable bridge slaves echoed about in Meng Hao's mind, transforming into thunderous roar capable of splitting heaven and earth. It filled his mind, his heart, to the point of explosion. The explosion originated in the sound created by the countless bridge slaves. It transformed into vast amounts of sharp thorns that pierced all of Meng Hao's body. The provocation filled his brain and caused tremors to run through his body. After 8 such tremors, Meng Hao's eyes suddenly snapped open. At first, his eyes were lit with confusion. The voices of the bridge slaves had been cut off without a trace. As of this moment, Meng Hao was the only person who was awake within the river of stars. He looked around in confusion for the space of 3 breaths before his gaze shone with clarity. In the moment he gained clarity, Meng Hao realized that he couldn't move. It was as if he had been awakened with only enough power to open his eyes. His divine sense was being suppressed intensely and was restricted to a space about 30 meters. Even paralyzed, he could still see the stars and the countless fragments of light and dust speeding along. Then he noticed someone off in the distance, floating there with his eyes closed. It was none other than Zhao Feng, who the spirit-severing patriarch of the great Cloud Sky tribe had entrusted him with protecting. "Am I the only one awake? But why?" Meng Hao suddenly caught sight of the bridge of immortality. When that happened, the image of Xianxia suddenly flashed through his mind. Meanwhile, back on the bridge of immortality, the countless dots of light were beginning to fade away. The lights that represented Xianxia and his wife gradually disappeared. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed with understanding as he realized that the reason he had awoken was most likely because of Xianxia. Although he couldn't be absolutely certain what had led to this state of clarity, Meng Hao couldn't help but ponder how it might be useful to him in the primordial demon immortal plane. In any case, there couldn't be a downside. In fact, now that he was clear-headed, he was sure that there must be a way to use this opportunity to get an advantage. If I can see some unique opportunity, I might be able to get ahead. Perhaps this simple awakening of mind would have a big influence on other matters. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed as the river of stars passed the bridge of immortality and then shot out into the star-studded sky behind it. As it passed into this region of the starry sky, an intense roaring sound echoed out. Meng Hao's body shook, completely beyond his control, and the entire river of stars trembled. He slammed into countless motes of dust, although none of them harmed him in the slightest. Ignoring the fact that he couldn't control his own body, Meng Hao fixed his eyes up ahead. He could just barely make out what was happening. Apparently, as it entered this particular area, the river of stars had slammed into an invisible barrier, causing everything to shake as if it were sustaining an attack. At the same time, Meng Hao could sense that the river of stars had actually slammed through the barrier, almost as if it had entered into another world. When that happened, Meng Hao noticed that all of the dust motes around him suddenly stopped moving. Even he was suddenly motionless. Outside of the river of stars, a variety of bright colors could be seen shining. What was strangest of all to him, while he was stuck in this state of motionlessness, a woman had appeared off to the right, although he had no idea when exactly it had happened. She wore a long blue gown and was quite pretty. Her eyes were closed, and her features were so delicate it seemed as if a gentle breeze could shatter her. In addition, she seemed to be filled with a certain coldness. This woman was unfamiliar. Meng Hao looked at her for a moment, then glanced away toward the colorful lights outside. Time passed. The river of stars was motionless, and yet somehow Meng Hao felt the sensation of movement. He pondered this point for a while as he looked around at this world of silence. After a bit of time passed, he suddenly came to an understanding. The river of stars wasn't moving. What was moving was time. Time was moving, not forward but rather in reverse. Time was moving backward. This discovery caused Meng Hao's mind to tremble. As he looked at the brightly colored lights, He suddenly had the intense premonition that if he could gain enlightenment regarding this strange place, he would have a much more profound understanding of time, as well as matters relating to the usage and branding of time treasures. He also knew that such an opportunity was exceedingly rare. After much time passed, Meng Hao's mind grew blank as he immersed himself in enlightenment regarding the reversal of time. By combining this new information with what he had observed regarding the changes to time in the realm of the bridge ruins, his understanding grew deeper. Suddenly, the river of stars shook again. Again it felt as if it had struck up against some invisible obstacle. After passing through, Meng Hao suddenly caught sight of a shocking world. In the same instant in which he caught sight of the world, all the dust motes and fragments of light within the river of stars trembled. The movement suddenly caused the closed-eyed woman off to the right to bump into Meng Hao. Meng Hao's head, his face, was suddenly touching something very soft. A delicate aroma washed over his face.